Chapter 1. 30 million. I want Luo Qingtong's life. The world's #1 Arcana assassin union offered the highest price of the day. However, this 30 million did not attract anyone's attention. A cold voice replied, rejecting him. Not enough. 50 million. The other party seemed unwilling to give up until he achieved his goal and continued to increase the price. Not enough. Still, no one turned back. That cold voice continued to refuse. 80 million. No, 100 million. 100 million US dollars. That should be enough, right? I must kill Luo Qingtong. A hysterical voice came from the other side. That cold voice paused for a moment. Just when the person behind the computer thought that he was going to agree, that cold voice said with a little disdain, "Sir, can I trouble you to check the price before you go on a mission next time?" Luo Qingtong's assassination mission has always been ranked at the top of the world's assassination list. The starting price is 1 billion. US dollars. 100 million. They wanted to take Luo Qingtong's life. What kind of joke was this? In the last assassination attempt, the Arcana Guild had sent 3 of the world's top Arcana experts, including the vice president, to kill Luo Qingtong. The names of these 3 people were enough to cause a huge sensation in the world's Arcana world. Even the heads of state had to treat them with caution and use the power of the country to guard against them. However, when it came to Luo Qingtong, they easily lost all information. Until now, they still did not know whether those 3 people were alive or dead. From then on, Luo Qingtong's price rose to the top of the world's Arcana Union's assassination list. Moreover, until now, no one had surpassed it. No one dared to take on this order. The reason why a high price of 1 billion was because a price of 1 billion was enough to make a country go crazy. If a country was in a crisis and urgently needed such a large sum of money, perhaps they could activate the national missile system to directly lock onto Luo Qingtong's position and launch a bombing. Perhaps, there was a certain possibility that they could kill that terrifying woman. In other words, the starting price of 1 billion was not the price of an assassination, but the full force of a country. But even the full force of a country may not be able to do anything to Luo Qingtong, that peerless monster. After all, she was the only supreme ocular sorcerer in the world. A pair of demonic blood-red eyes, seemingly able to see through everything in the world. If she said that she could see through the trajectory of the missile and avoid it in advance, he would believe her. He wanted to take her life with just 100 million USD. If it weren't for the fact that the customer was paramount, he would have spat out a hee-hee in the other party's face. But speaking of which, 100 million US dollars was already a sky-high price if it wasn't for Luo Qingtong. Most small countries would not be able to fork out so much money even if they used all their resources. He didn't know what Luo Qingtong had done to make the other party so crazy. While the members of the Assassins' Union were astonished, on a private beach in the Caribbean Bay, Luo Qingtong was lying on the ground, looking at the bead in her hand under the sunlight. That bead was round and smooth like jade, looking like a crystal. The color and light stirred inside was as dazzling as the starry sky. This is the thing that Country M's Area 51 treats as their lifeblood. There's nothing special about it. Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows as she looked at the bead in her hand. She really didn't know why Country M treated it as their lifeblood. Area 51 had 3 layers of defense. With her ability, she was almost exposed when she sneaked in. One must know that under her pair of blood-red eyes, the defense of Area 51 was almost non-existent. In this case, she was almost caught. Was this bead so important? Luo Qingtong looked left and right, but she couldn't see what was so special about this bead. The girl was lying on the white beach, facing the sunlight. The rays of the sun shone on the bead in her hand and refracted a 7-colored brilliance, setting off her perfectly proportioned figure, making her look like a soul-stirring muse in ancient Greek mythology. What was even more amazing was Luo Qingtong's beautiful eastern face. She looked like a jade doll, revealing the mysterious and reserved beauty unique to the East. But when a trace of sharpness appeared in her eyes, the smile on her lips curled up wickedly, instantly turning her into the dark goddess described in the Western Hell. Bewitching people's hearts, wild and evil, like a blooming flower of hell. Tisk, it's useless. Unable to see any clues, Luo Qingtong felt quite bored. With a casual flick of her finger, she flicked the bead to the side. As the number one person in the 24th century's ability world, the supreme technique master, and an existence feared by the entire ability world and even all the countries in the world, Luo Qingtong had seen countless treasures. Such a thing that country M valued so much, in her eyes, was just a relatively beautiful gadget. However, no one expected that when Luo Qingtong raised her hand and flicked away the bead that made Area 51 put a sky-high bounty on her, a few lines of ancient seal characters suddenly appeared on it. The next second, with a boom, a sudden clap of thunder. Luo Qingtong's figure was instantly sucked in. Ah! The people on the beach thought it was a terrorist attack and fled in fright. Chapter 2. True Spill Continent, at the extreme western edge. Eastern Fence Nation, Nine Witch Mountain. Ah! Who are you people? A young girl in a pink dress, who was dressed luxuriously and had an exquisite face, was knocked to the ground. Her dantian had been hit by a palm, and the energy in her body was quickly draining away. In an instant, she had fallen from a peak phase 9 martial artist to an ordinary person. The girl lay on the ground powerlessly. She looked at the group of men in black that had suddenly appeared around her. She did not know where they had come from. The place where she had broken through was extremely secretive. Besides a few people, no one else knew about it. The entire Nine Witch Mountain was so big. Why did these people target her? Moreover, the moment he made his move, he was so vicious and ruthless, directly crippling her cultivation. Soon, she had an answer. Ha! Big sister, how does it feel to be trash? With light steps, a young girl wearing a light blue dress with flowing clouds slowly walked out from behind the group of black-clothed men. Her hands were behind her back, and there was a pleasant tinkling sound of pendants. Every step she took was like stepping on Luo Qingtong's heart. Her entire body trembled uncontrollably. Luo Xining. It's you. It's you. The girl did not expect that the person who had harmed her was the little sister that she had taken care of. Luo Xining, the third daughter of the Luo family's second concubine of the marquis residents of the Eastern Fence Nation. She had been weak and sickly since young and was not valued. It was the girl who had brought her along and used her own resources to nourish her body. Finally, she was able to practice martial arts and develop her talent. She became the third generation of the Luo family, second only to her. Everyone had a reason to betray her. Only Luo Xining could not. Because everything she had was given to her by her. Why? Why are you doing this to me? The girl did not want to believe all of this. How had she done anything wrong to Luo Xining? How could she do this to her? Taking advantage of her breakthrough, she brought people to attack her and destroy her cultivation. You can only blame yourself for being too lucky. You're an eyesore. Luo Xining looked at the beautiful girl who was lying on the ground and could not get up no matter how hard she tried. She felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Luo Qingtong, the first daughter of the Luo family. Luo Qingtong had always been on top of her. In terms of strength, Luo Qingtong was the first in the third generation of the Luo family. In terms of beauty, Luo Qingtong was the number one beauty in Dongli country. She had a beautiful face, snow-white skin, and a jade-like complexion. She didn't need to take care of herself every day. Wherever she stood, she would be the center of attention. Especially that pair of jade-green eyes, they were like two crescents of clear spring water, flowing with light and overflowing with color, sparkling and translucent, causing her already extremely beautiful appearance to be set off to become extremely outstanding. It was said that the eldest daughter of the Luo clan had a celestial appearance and was absolutely beautiful. She was like a heavenly goddess who could be seen from afar but could not be approached. That was indeed the case. Even Luo Xianning, who claimed to be a beauty, felt that as long as she stood beside Luo Qingtong, she would immediately turn from a beautiful peony into a wild flower by the roadside. The so-called national beauty was nothing more than this. Looking at Luo Qingtong, who was lying on the ground but still looked elegant and beautiful, Luo Xining felt an indescribable jealousy in her heart. She stepped forward, raised her hand and pinched Luo Qingtong's chin, and lifted her face. Chapter 3. Before Luo Qingtong could react, she felt Luo Xining raise her hand. With a swoosh, something flew into her eyes. Ah! Luo Qingtong screamed. When that thing entered her eyes, it was as if her eyes were being burned by a soldering iron. She blacked out and rolled on the ground. Her snow-white skin was covered in mud and grass. Luo Qingtong's hair was messy. Between her fingers, which were covering her eyes, black blood flowed out as she screamed in pain. I've destroyed your cultivation, but that's not enough. I'll destroy your eyes too. Luo Xining looked down at Luo Qingtong, who was screaming and rolling on the ground. Her voice was clear, but there was a chilling viciousness in it. Sister, don't blame me. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. There are too many benefits for me to deal with you. I can't refuse. You can only blame yourself for being too lucky. You've offended someone you shouldn't have. Luo Xining then said to the men in black, I'll leave her to you guys. You can do whatever you want. But after tomorrow, I want to see Luo Qingtong, with her chastity and dignity shattered, at the gates of Wingay's city. Do you understand? Yes. The men in black answered loudly. Many of them looked at Luo Qingtong with lewd smiles. She was the #1 beauty of Dongli country. Now, they were going to take advantage of her. The men in black couldn't wait any longer. Luo Xining didn't look at Luo Qingtong again. She turned and left. She was very relaxed. From now on, she was the #1 genius of the Luo family. All of Luo Qingtong's glory would be hers. And Luo Qingtong herself would become a disgrace to the Luo family, an unchaste cripple. In this way, she would have completed the task given to her by that person. Ha! Brothers, let's have some fun. Seeing that Luo Xining had left, a group of men in black surrounded her. At this moment, Luo Qingtong had lost all her cultivation. She didn't even have the strength to truss up a chicken. She was no match for them. She could only watch in despair as they got closer and closer. Luo Xining, I will not let you go. I will never let you off. Even if I become a ghost, I will haunt you forever and never let you die a good death. Seeing the men in black approaching her, Luo Qingtong felt despair. She gritted her teeth and was about to commit suicide by biting her tongue. However, one of the men in black noticed her movements. Seeing that she actually dared to seek death in front of them, the black-clothed man was infuriated. He took a step forward, grabbed her chin, and fiercely slapped her. Bitch! We brothers haven't had our fun yet. You actually dare to seek death? The black-clothed man was so angry that he forgot that Luo Qingtong had lost all her cultivation and was now an ordinary person. The celestial chi in his palm was used to slap Luo Qingtong and send her flying. F***CK. You idiot. What if you kill her? Seeing Luo Qingtong fly out and crash heavily into an ancient tree that was as thick as 10 people, the other black-robed men were all shocked. They cursed the black-clothed man fiercely and hurriedly ran over. However, no one knew that just as they ran over, Luo Qingtong, who had fainted under the ancient tree, suddenly opened her eyes. Whoosh! Chapter 4. Hiss. Damn it. What's going on? Luo Qingtong only remembered that she had flicked the strange bead that she had obtained from Area 51. Then, her vision turned black and she lost consciousness. Now that she was awake, why did she feel so much pain all over her body? Especially her eyes. Waves of burning pain surged up, and her vision turned black. Obviously, she was blind. What's going on? Feeling the intense pain all over her body and even her eyes, Luo Qingtong couldn't help but swear no matter how tough she was. Just then, a pervert's hand touched her. Ha! She's not dead yet. Brothers, come and have some fun. Line up according to what we discussed earlier. Luo Qingtong was already in a bad mood because of the intense pain and blindness in her eyes. When she heard the other party's words, the corners of her lips curled up into a bloodthirsty and evil smile. Very good. The other party seemed to want to rape her. And it wasn't just one person, but a group of people. Good. Very good. Ever since her reputation as the evil eye spread, no one dared to say such lewd words in front of her, let alone take action. These people were very good. The grass on the grave of the last person who touched her without her permission was probably as tall as a person, wasn't it? Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong's smile became even more evil and wild. Paw! Just as that person was speaking, her hand suddenly grabbed and twisted, breaking the neck of the black-clothed man who had been the first to approach her and tried to touch her. Third brother. The other men in black had just arrived. When they saw the man in black's neck drooping down, how could they not know that he was already dead? They looked at Luo Qingtong in horror. This. Wasn't her cultivation already crippled? Her eyes were also blinded by the poison. How could she still kill third brother? One had to know that although third brother's strength wasn't very strong, he was still above average among them. But he was actually killed by a cripple, in one move. And a blind cripple. How did she do it? How could they know that Luo Qingtong was an ocular sorcerer, but she was proficient in medicine, poison, and combat? This was because a heaven-defying support skill like an ocular sorcerer was highly coveted in the special ability world. Luo Qingtong's eyes were born with blood-red pupils, which could see through all the falsehoods in the world. Appraising, see-through, penetrating defenses. There was nothing he couldn't do. Even the strongest defense in the world was useless against her. In the Pentagon, Luo Qingtong came and went as she pleased. The president's White House was heavily guarded. Luo Qingtong could enter and leave as she pleased. Luo Qingtong only needed to take a look at all kinds of antiques and treasures to know whether they were real or fake. Furthermore, she could see through a person's meridians and bones. She knew the condition of the person's body and where the illness was. Such a heaven-defying ability brought Luo Qingtong unlimited benefits and convenience, but it also made her bear all kinds of troubles. All the countries in the world, special ability and ancient martial arts, all of them wanted her ability and wanted her to serve them. And if Luo Qingtong didn't have any ability to protect herself, she would have been encircled as an exclusive property and become a walking corpse and chess piece under the control of others. How could she have made such a great name for herself in the special ability world, making the entire special ability world and all the countries in the world afraid of her? Her eyes being blinded by poison wasn't a big deal to her. Chapter 5. Swoosh. Bloody light gathered in Luo Qingtong's eyes. Specks of blood-red light rose from it, drawing a dark red 3D scene in front of her eyes. The movements of the black-robed man in front of her were revealed to her by her eye technique. This was one of the most basic functions of Luo Qingtong's pupil technique, vision. The large net that was spread out with mental power captured the movements of everyone within the range. It was 100 times more powerful than infrared imaging. With this ability, Luo Qingtong could annihilate all enemies at night, even if she was blind. Once, she broke into the White House of the Am Nation at night. Under the bombardment of thousands of flares, she could still move freely, killing hundreds of people and calmly escaping. Since then, she had shaken the entire ability world and became famous overnight. Bang! Raising her hand to push away the corpse in front of her, Luo Qingtong's blood-stained little face bloomed with a wicked and enchanting smile. Like a bloodthirsty demon flower, she smiled and looked at the group of men in black rushing over. You want to die? I'll fulfill your wish. Her jade-like face was emitting a dazzling brilliance at this moment. The girl's eyes were blurred with black blood, and her gaze was empty. At this moment, her whole body was exuding a fierce and bloodthirsty aura. The tip of her pink tongue gently poked out and licked the wound on the corner of her lips. Feeling the pain, the smile on Luo Qingtong's lips deepened. You! They found that Luo Qingtong was completely different from before. Looking at Luo Qingtong, who was as beautiful as a demon sucking people's souls, the group of men in black felt not full of amazement and infatuation, but a bone-chilling coldness. Why did this Luo Qingtong suddenly give off such a terrifying feeling in just a short while? The group of men in black was bewildered. But soon, they dispelled the bewilderment in their hearts and calmed down. Luo Qingtong, don't be deliberately mystifying. You couldn't beat us when you were still a cultivator. What can you do now that you're a cripple? You're too naive if you want to use this to scare us away. The group of men in black thought that Luo Qingtong, as the eldest daughter of the Luo family, must have some life-saving items and means on her. Although they didn't know why she didn't come out before, perhaps she was worried about Luo Xining's presence. After all, the others' cultivation was much higher than theirs. But no matter whether Luo Qingtong was deliberately mystifying or not, they would not let her go today. Brothers, go! The group of men in black rushed towards Luo Qingtong with weapons. In their opinion, Luo Qingtong was a cripple. Even if she had some life-saving means, how many times could she use them? She was also a blind cripple. If they went together, they would capture of Luo Xining. However, they didn't expect they had guessed the beginnings, Qingtong. The battle only took 2 seconds, but it wasn't them who captured Luo Qingtong, it was the latter who killed them all. Of love. Luo Qingtong's eyes emitted rays of bloody light. In the next second, her figure rose up and passed through those black-clothed people in an instant. In the blink of an eye, the sound of heavy objects falling to the ground was heard. The men in black who rushed towards her crazily fell to the ground one by one with their eyes wide open. There was an extremely thin line of blood running from the front to the back of their necks. Humph! Luo Qingtong snorted coldly. With a flick of her wrist, she put away the jade hairpin that was still losing blood in her palm and inserted it back into her hair bun. Chapter 6. What? Feeling the ferocity of this attack, Luo Qingtong's heart was filled with astonishment. In the next second, her entire body soared into the air, and at the last second, as if she had the help of God, she leaned back and dodged the attack that came from the dark. It was a sure kill attack. Boom! The aftershock of the attack hit Luo Qingtong heavily. Even after she dodged it, she still staggered back a few steps. Blood surged in her chest. Luo Qingtong's eyes were filled with astonishment. She raised her head and looked at the place where the attack had come from. That attack just now was equivalent to the bombardment of an ion cannon. Since when could a person produce such power? What the hell was this place? Luo Qingtong thought that she was in an unknown jungle on Earth. But now, it seemed that this was probably not the world she was in. Just as Luo Qingtong's thoughts were racing, behind her, from the place where the attack had come from, a fierce and terrifying aura suddenly rose up. Obviously, these people were going to attack again after their first attack failed. Oh no! Sensing these auras, Luo Qingtong's expression suddenly changed. These people's auras were too strong. Every one of their auras was beyond Luo Qingtong's expectations. Moreover, when she glanced over, she could only vaguely see some shadows. She couldn't see where the other party was hiding. When did her eyesight become so weak? District 51 had such a tight defense, yet she could enter and leave as she pleased. Now, these people were so close to her, yet she couldn't see them. These people were not ordinary. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong made a prompt decision. She directly bit the tip of her tongue. She spat out a mouthful of blood. The bloody light in her eyes intensified, and she immediately saw the appearance of the people who had ambushed her. It was a group of people in silver. Everyone's aura was incomparably majestic and vast. The blood chi surrounding them was not something that the black-clothed men from before could compare to. To put it bluntly, even if there were hundreds of black-robed men, they wouldn't be able to deal with any of the silver-robed men. An expert. An absolute expert. Luo Qingtong felt such a deep threat for the first time since she became famous. She didn't have time to think. The bloody light in her eyes flickered, and she quickly found the path of survival in the enemy's trajectory. In the next second, her figure suddenly shot forward like an arrow leaving the bow. Bang! When those people's auras rushed over, she rushed towards an ancient tree beside her and stomped her feet on it. His body suddenly made an S-shaped turn in the air, dodging the attacks of those people. Like a fluttering butterfly, he flew towards the depths of the Nine Magi Mountain. Chase! The silver-robed men with black masks jumped out from the bushes. When they saw that Luo Qingtong had escaped from their attacks, their eyes flashed with astonishment. They were originally secretly supervising those people to deal with Luo Qingtong. They wanted to make sure that nothing went wrong. They didn't expect her to suddenly change her personality and kill the group of black-robed men. Now, she had escaped from their hands. With their strength, how could they let a blind person with no cultivation escape from a place like Dongli country? Was it luck or? Chapter 7. Swoosh! Swoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure passed through the long grass and dense forest. Relying on her excellent jungle experience, Luo Qingtong always kept a distance from the people chasing her. However, this could only last for a while. This body was injured and couldn't support it for a long time. Even if Luo Qingtong's willpower was strong and could hold on, the injuries on her body were bound to make her speed and movement sluggish. And the people chasing behind her were so strong that they didn't seem to be human. Luo Qingtong felt that with her ability, even in the 24th century, where everyone took physical potions, she was definitely outstanding. However, she had a feeling that if she was careless and was caught by the other party, then she wouldn't have a chance to escape. This world was really strange. Where the hell was she brought to? Luo Qingtong's strength was already the absolute number one in the ability world of the 24th century. She didn't expect to kick an iron plate when she woke up. However, this body was too heavily injured and didn't have any strength in it. Otherwise, even if she faced those people, with her eye technique, she wouldn't be unable to fight back. Let them be arrogant for a while. When she found a chance to recover some of her injuries and strength, she would kill these people. What Luo Qingtong hated the most was being chased. Because she had encountered this too many times when she first entered the ability world. Everyone thought that she was easy to bully and was a rare commodity worth hoarding. In the end, those people all died. These people now would be no exception. Thinking of this, her eyes flashed with a fierce look, and the bloody light in her eyes deepened. At this moment, a ray of light suddenly flashed in her eyes. Oh, this is, Luo Qingtong raised her eyes and looked in front of her in surprise. Suddenly, her lips curled up and she quickened her pace. Swoosh! Just as her figure was moving forward rapidly, the silver-robed men who were chasing after her saw her suddenly accelerating figure. Their eyes were also filled with shock. Previously, they thought that Luo Qingtong was lucky enough to escape. But now, under such a long pursuit, Luo Qingtong, a cripple, was able to maintain a distance from them, making them unable to catch up. This was somewhat terrifying. One had to know that the strength of each of them could be considered extremely powerful in a low-level country like Eastern Fence Country. Luo Qingtong was a blind person and an ordinary person whose cultivation had been destroyed. How did she manage to run so fast under their pursuit? They watched in shock as Luo Qingtong's body flew up and down in the forest like a butterfly. She entered the forest as though she was on flat ground. They almost suspected that Luo Qingtong's blindness and disability were just an illusion. But they had seen Luo Qingtong being crippled with their own eyes. And the poison in her eyes was personally given to Luo Xinning before they came. It was the medicine sent by that person from that place. There was absolutely no mistake. What exactly happened to this Luo Qingtong? How did she become so terrifying? As the silver-clothed people thought, they became even more determined to catch Luo Qingtong and kill her. Her transformation was so shocking now. She must have some kind of secret on her. They must catch her and interrogate her about the secret. At the same time, they must not let her leave this place alive. Otherwise, if she knew what they had done in the future, there would be no end of trouble. And just as the silver-clothed people were about to kill Luo Qingtong had already appeared in front of the flash of light in her eyes. Ha! Array! Luo Qingtong laughed happily. The corners of her lips curled up slightly. With this array, she was not afraid of the silver-clothed people's pursuit. Chapter 8. However, this formation was well hidden. If it weren't for Luo Qingtong's vision, she probably wouldn't have been able to discover the location of this formation in this forest. When she got closer, Luo Qingtong was even more astonished. Because this formation was hundreds of times more difficult and obscure than the formations in the ancient books she had read in the 24th century. It was definitely not an easy task to crack it. Fortunately, she had her vision. As Luo Qingtong thought so, the bloody light in her eyes flashed. In an instant, she saw through the path of energy circulation in this formation. Her figure flashed, and she rushed in. But Luo Qingtong never imagined that she would see such an erotic and hot scene when she rushed in. She stared unblinkingly at the scene in front of her. She saw a naked man's body appear in her line of sight under a waist-deep jade spring. In the dark red vision, the man was soaking in the jade spring. His bronze-colored body had muscles that were slightly knotted and bulging. The lines of his flesh were firm and smooth. He was as beautiful as a work of art created by the heavens. The man's face was hidden in a cloud of mist, faintly discernible. Even though Luo Qingtong's vision had been activated to the extreme at this moment, she still couldn't see through the faint light surrounding his face, let alone see his face clearly. This was the first time Luo Qingtong's vision had failed since she had mastered it. She actually couldn't see his face clearly. But even so, it didn't diminish the other party's charm at all. The man exuded an astonishing aura. Even in such a bare scene, it still gave people an extremely noble and elegant feeling. The aura surrounding his body was like that of a king descending to the world. He was lying on the edge of the pool, his body leaning back slightly, and his hands resting on the edge of the spring. Because of this action, the lines of his back unfolded with great tension. The butterfly bones on his back were clearly visible. His head was slightly raised, and the corner of his smooth chin could be vaguely seen through the faint mist. Just the beautiful lines that were revealed were enough to prove that this man was absolutely a high-quality handsome man. And a handsome man with an excellent figure. Luo Qingtong looked at the other party's exposed body. The jade-colored spring water was not very deep. It only reached the man's crotch. As the spring water rippled, the lower half of the man's body was faintly discernible. Oh my God! He was simply bewitching. Luo Qingtong felt that she was about to have a nosebleed just by looking at it. She was used to seeing handsome men and beautiful women in the 24th century. But no matter which type of handsome man he was, whether it was a young fresh meat or an old cured meat, there was no way he could be compared to this man who didn't even show his face. She looked at the mermaid line that was deep into the clear water, the well-defined 8-pack abs, and the beautiful muscle lines. She couldn't take her eyes off the half-naked man's body no matter how hard she tried. This body was truly the most masculine body she had ever seen in her life. Who would have thought that he would have such luck with women? This benefit was really great. Luo Qingtong was thinking this when she suddenly met a pair of cold eyes that were as cold as ice in the 12th lunar month, incomparably deep and cold. That pair of eyes seemed to have the color of a knife. Luo Qingtong only met his gaze and inexplicably felt a burst of fear. This man was not to be trifled with. With such a definition in her heart, Luo Qingtong coughed lightly and was about to explain to the other party that she just accidentally entered. However, before she could open her mouth, the man's gaze directly swept across her eyes, and then closed his eyes again. Luo Qingtong was surprised for a moment, and then belatedly reacted. In the eyes of outsiders, she was a blind woman. Very good, very powerful. She could look at the handsome man while healing her injuries. Luo Qingtong thought, sat down cross-legged, and was about to check her injuries. At this moment, a burst of neat and powerful footsteps suddenly came from outside. Chapter 9. Swish. The handsome man, who had just closed his eyes, opened them again. Luo Qingtong saw that he was looking in her direction with cold eyes, and his thin lips moved slightly. Luo Qingtong knew that things were not going well when she saw this. The other party was obviously disturbed and was preparing to drive her away. Luo Qingtong did not have time to check on her injuries, let alone recover some of her strength. After running through the forest for such a long time, her physical strength was almost exhausted. If she was discovered, there was no way she could escape. Thinking of this, her eyes suddenly flashed. Almost at the same time that the other party's lips moved, she dodged and rushed directly into the spring. At this moment, she pulled out the jade hairpin in her hair and held it in her hand, aiming it at the vital part 3 inches below the man's abdomen. At the same time, her soft little hand covered the other party's lips that were about to open. Handsome man, I'm in an emergency. Let me borrow your place to take refuge. I don't think you'll refuse the request of a weak woman like me, right? Luo Qingtong's body was tightly pressed against the man's body because of the force from before when she had rushed into the spring. Her lips were pressed against the man's ear, her breath was like orchids, and her words were delicate and pitiful. If one did not see her other hand's ferocious actions hidden under the spring, they would have mistaken her for very delicate and helpless. Yi Qianqian's gaze was cold and angry as he looked at the woman who had intruded into his healing spring. The other party's face was covered in blood and dirt, and she was so sloppy that it was impossible to see her original appearance. However, that pair of slightly raised lips and the wanton and evil smile on it gave her a kind of dazzling charm. No one had ever dared to treat him like this. Yi Qianqian's heart was filled with extreme anger when he felt the piercing pain from the sharp point of the other party's lower abdomen. You're not blind. He looked coldly at the other party's eyes, which were still empty and lifeless, and his thin lips were tightly pursed. He had actually misjudged. Ha, who said that? I'm blind. Luo Qingtong closed her eyes and pretended to be stupid. She did not want this man to find out that she had seen him naked. She was already very unlucky to have offended this man. Luo Qingtong's intuition told her that this man was very dangerous. He was countless times more dangerous than those silver-robed men outside. If the other party found out that she had not only threatened him, but also seen his naked body. The consequences. Ha ha ha. Yi Qianxian did not believe her words. The other party's quick, accurate and ruthless movements just now was definitely not a blind person's movements. Luo Qingtong knew that she couldn't hide it from him anymore, so she decided to go all out. I say, handsome, why are you staring at me like that? What's going on? Could it be that you've taken a fancy to me? She leaned close to him, almost pressing her entire body against his. Her breath smelled like orchids. But the hand holding the jade hairpin was even closer to the other party's thing lying in the grass. You have to know, when a handsome man like you stares at me like this, it makes my little heart beat wildly. If I'm not careful and can't control myself, maybe. Her tone was ambiguous as she said this, and the sharp point in her hand gently slid over a certain person's vital part. The ice-cold touch was constantly telling the other party, your little brother is in my hands. Ah. Chapter 10. Hearing her words, the anger in Yi Qianxian's heart almost broke through the sky. At this moment, Luo Qingtong suddenly felt some changes in her body. She was so shocked that her hand slipped. In an instant, her tender fingers that were holding the jade hairpin touched something lying in the grass below the man's lower body. Being touched by this soft and tender touch, almost instinctively, the man's body suddenly tensed up. You! Yi Qianxian's body stiffened. His gaze was incomparably angry and cold as he looked at this lustful woman. She actually dared. Cough cough. I'm sorry. My hand slipped. Absolutely my hand slipped. Luo Qingtong looked at the man's angry eyes and coughed lightly. However, all of her explanations looked like she was trying to cover up. Hand slipped. Ha! Even Luo Qingtong herself didn't believe this reason. But she really didn't have the intention to take advantage of this man. Although she often teased young fresh meat and old cured meat in the 24th century when she had nothing to do, verbally taking advantage of men, she really wasn't that unprincipled. While threatening others, her hands were up and down. She really wasn't such a wretched person. Luo Qingtong didn't even have the confidence to explain herself. But heavens knew that her hand really slipped. Because Luo Qingtong suddenly realized that the injuries in her body seemed to have healed in an instant. Even the dantian in her lower abdomen that had been in severe pain before had regenerated strength. In fact, when Luo Qingtong had just woken up, she had discovered that her body's strength had been crippled by someone. It was precisely because of this that the strength of this body had weakened so much. For a martial arts practitioner, a crippled dantian was almost equivalent to being completely crippled. Unless they could find some immortal spirit herb that could defy the heavens and change their fate, they would be a cripple for the rest of their lives. But Luo Qingtong was different. Her eye technique could allow her to repair the damage to her dantian. She just needed to give her some time. However, she did not expect that just now, a warm current would suddenly flow through her body and heal her internal injuries. At the same time, it also repaired her dantian. It was also because of this that Luo Qingtong's hand trembled in shock and accidentally touched the other party's little brother. She really couldn't be blamed for this. However, this warm current seemed to be brought by the spring water. Could it be that this man was recuperating in the spring water, which was why he was able to activate the array formation outside and was unable to resist her actions? Luo Qingtong felt a little strange. She had gotten it too easily. This man wasn't simple at all. Why didn't he resist at all? So it was because he was recuperating. Yi Qianxian looked at her coldly. That pair of sharp sword-like eyes, which seemed to carry a bloody aura, stared closely at her, as if he wanted to carve her entire person into the depths of his heart. Just as Luo Qingtong was getting goosebumps from his stare, he suddenly closed his eyes again. Golialu, under Luo Qingtong's gaze, the green spring water around the two of them suddenly boiled fiercely. The green color inside quickly disappeared, as if something was rapidly absorbing the medicinal properties within, causing the spring water to quickly become transparent. Luo Qingtong looked at the changes in the spring water in amazement. Soon, she also felt the warm current surging in her body. The other party was indeed recuperating. But why didn't she see any scars on his body? Luo Qingtong was astonished. Her gaze wandered up and down the other party's body. Chapter 11. Cough, cough, cough. Someone's capital was really strong. Luo Qingtong tried her best to look away from the other party. However, the other party's strong capital kept ringing in her mind. Damn it! Her illustrious reputation. One must know that although Luo Qingtong usually liked to talk nonsense and looked evil and strong, in fact, it was the first time she saw a man's thing. This feeling was simply indescribable. She was clearly taken advantage of, but she didn't even have a place to reason. She also felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. Simply. But even so, her hand holding the jade hairpin firmly pressed against the other party's lower body didn't loosen at all. No matter who took advantage of who, she couldn't let go. The power in the spring was quickly being absorbed. Luo Qingtong's strength was also quickly recovering. Feeling the abundant power in her body, Luo Qingtong smiled and narrowed her eyes. But soon, she restrained her smile. Because she felt that the dangerous aura that the man gave her was even stronger. Her injuries were all healed, so this man should be almost healed as well. Luo Qingtong estimated that the people outside should be far away and immediately prepared to leave. After all, she forced this man who didn't look simple to the spring and threatened him. She also took liberties with his little brother. Fine. She made a mistake. But the other party didn't believe it. That's right, she also stole his healing spring water. Luo Qingtong calculated in her heart. She felt that if she were in his shoes, the first thing she would do after recovering was to teach the other party how to be a proper person. She'd better hurry and leave. Thinking of this, she put away the jade hairpin in her hand and elegantly inserted it back into her hair bun. Then, her whole body swept out of the spring water. Bye-bye, ah. Handsome, we won't meet again. We won't meet again. This compensation is for you to get over your shock. Also, I really made a mistake just now. I didn't mean to take liberties with you. Her words caused Yi Qianxian, who had his eyes closed in the spring and was taking the time to heal his injuries, to open his eyes. He glared at her coldly and angrily. Ha! Luo Qingtong laughed dryly and waved at him. She muttered to herself, "Why are you being so serious? Although I've seen your naked body, I'm still at a disadvantage. That thing was so ugly, who would want to look at it? Although he was handsome, that didn't include that thing." These words successfully caused Yi Qianxian's expression to change. Good. Very good. Luo Qingtong thought that no one could hear her ridicule, but little did she know that Yi Qianxian had heard it all. This woman actually felt that she was at a disadvantage after seeing him naked. Yi Qianxian looked angrily in the direction that Luo Qingtong left. The anger in his eyes soared, even hotter than the blazing clouds in the sky. Especially when he saw the so-called compensation that Luo Qingtong threw out, his eyes became even more furious. That was something that Luo Qingtong had found from the black-clothed men. Although it was considered pretty good in Dongli country. But to Yi Qianxian, it was even worse than the trash on the streets. This was the compensation that woman gave him to get over his shock. Yi Qianxian was so angry that he laughed. He had never been treated like this by a woman before. No woman dared to get close to him, and he didn't allow any woman to get close to him. Chapter 12. Yi Qianxian was infuriated, and the battle qi around him surged even more fiercely. The spring water, which had already become completely transparent, was stirred up by the aura around his body. It was like a tornado that rose into the air. At this moment, his eyes suddenly focused, and he looked at a certain place on the shore. There, a little thing that he had just obtained had disappeared. It must have escaped when that woman barged in just now. Thinking of this, Yi Qianxian's eyes suddenly narrowed. He was so angry before that he didn't notice how that woman broke through the Qinkuan single qi array he had set up. Although it was only a level 6 array he had casually set up, in this small place of Dongli country, no one should be able to break it. Thinking of how Luo Qingtong had left just now, like moving clouds and flowing water, without any hindrance, Yi Qianxian's eyes suddenly darkened. That woman was not simple. Whoosh! He stood up from the spring water, and a set of clothes silently appeared in the air, instantly wrapping the man's perfect body that angered both men and gods. In the next second, his figure quickly disappeared from the spot. The place where the jade spring had been was only left with a huge hole. It could be seen that the crater was created by a single blow from a human. It was obvious that this jade spring was not some natural healing spring water. It was a healing place that the man had created himself. Whoosh! Whoosh! Luo Qingtong's figure shuttled back and forth in the forest. After recovering from her injuries and her strength, she also felt that her body had become much lighter. I didn't expect that spring water to be so powerful. It actually healed my injuries in an instant. Luo Qingtong was astonished. However, the spring water seemed to be specially used to heal meridian injuries, and had no effect on the poison in her eyes. Could it be that the man had specially created it to heal his own injuries? Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong lightly coughed twice. It seemed that she had not only taken liberties with him, but also snatched his healing spring water. Moreover, she had snatched his special healing opportunity. If it was a public spring water, Luo Qingtong wouldn't have thought much of it. Heavenly treasures should be shared with everyone who sees them. However, if it was someone else's exclusive medicinal spring water, or if it was someone else's own medicine, then it would be awkward. Forget it, I've already snatched it anyway. That man didn't look simple at first glance. They might not have the chance to meet again in the future. Besides, if he really did encounter it, he would just help him if he got into trouble. Luo Qingtong thought so and immediately felt at ease. At this moment, she suddenly felt something heavy hanging from the corner of her clothes. With a swoosh, she lifted the corner of her clothes and looked at it. Immediately, she was speechless. What is this thing? She was speechless as she looked at the little pig that refused to let go of her clothes. When did this little thing hang on to his body? Looking at its small body, which was only the size of a palm, Luo Qingtong grabbed its little tail and lifted it up. Where did you come from, little thing? Could it have followed me out of the spring? She raised an eyebrow. Humph. The little pig's 4 hooves were struggling. Because she was holding its tail upside down, it couldn't turn over and kept struggling. Chapter 13. Luo Qingtong looked at the little guy. She didn't think that it came from that man. Judging from that man's aura, he didn't seem like someone who would use such a cute pet. Was that the little guy who secretly followed her in the forest? Luo Qingtong thought. She raised her hand and flicked its little nose. All right, you should go. I have things to do. I don't have time to take you with me. She still had to find those people who wanted to kill her and ask for some useful clues. She didn't have time to take this soft and harmless little guy with her. Humph. Seeing Luo Qingtong flicking her finger, the little pig flipped its 4 hooves and hugged her finger. It looked at her pitifully with its small eyes. Don't look at me like that. I won't fall for it. Acting cute doesn't work on me. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she was about to throw the little guy away. At this moment, a voice came from not far away. Here. She's here. When the voice sounded, Luo Qingtong suddenly became distracted. Then, she hissed in pain. It was the little pig that had taken advantage of her distraction to bite down on her finger. Hiss. This time, blood was immediately seen. Luo Qingtong reacted and was about to throw it away. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt dizzy. A mark suddenly appeared on Luo Qingtong's forehead and disappeared in a flash. It was the mark of an inverted five-pointed star. At the same time, a mark that was exactly the same as the inverted five-pointed star on Luo Qingtong's forehead also appeared on the little pig's body. With a smack, it covered its butt and disappeared into its body. What was that? Luo Qingtong's mind went blank for a moment. She raised her head and saw a blurry mark on the little pig's butt disappear in an instant. She frowned. She grabbed the pig and was about to interrogate it when a group of people suddenly rushed out from the bushes. She's here. Silver clothes and black scarves. They were the silver-clothed people who chased after her. How did he discover my tracks so quickly? Luo Qingtong raised her eyebrows. That's pretty fast. She didn't suppress her aura in vain to lure them out. You. How did your cultivation recover? The silver-clothed people looked at Luo Qingtong's aura that was obviously different from before. They immediately discovered that her cultivation had recovered. Not only that, Luo Qingtong, who was originally a stage 9 martial artist, had successfully broken through and advanced to martial master. Martial master. She actually advanced to martial master. A 14-year-old martial master was considered a genius even in their country, let alone in the Eastern Fence Nation. However, this wasn't what shocked the silver-clothed people. It was because Luo Qingtong's dantian was destroyed, but she was not injured at all. She even successfully broke through her original realm and became a martial master. What kind of amazing thing was this? One must know that when one's dantian was destroyed, unless there was a heaven-defying elixir or a heaven-grade Xian pill refined by a heavenly alchemist, the person's dantian would be destroyed. But how could a remote and inferior country like Dongli have such heaven-defying elixirs and heaven-grade Xian pills? Even their master would have to go through a lot of hardships to get one, and he might not be able to get it. But now, Luo Qingtong's cultivation had recovered. She must be holding a great opportunity in her hands. A heaven-grade Xian pill. She must have a heaven-grade Xian pill in her hands. Chapter 14. Luo Qingtong. Hand over the heaven-grade Xian core in your hands, or else don't blame us for being impolite. Those people shouted sternly. At this moment, a voice suddenly appeared in Luo Qingtong's mind. Humph. A bunch of fools. Ignorant fools. What is a heaven-grade Xian core? Compared to the medicinal liquid you've absorbed, it's simply trash. Don't mention a mere dantian, even a peerless trash would be transformed into a genius after being thrown into the medicinal liquid. These people only know about heaven-grade Xian cores. What a bunch of country bumpkins. And you, stupid woman. Seriously, to be chased by such trash, it's really embarrassing. When Luo Qingtong saw those people rushing out, she was prepared to ignore them. She turned around to lead them away, but a voice suddenly appeared in her mind. She was so startled that she slipped and almost fell to the ground. Who is it? She scanned her surroundings warily. Humph. Stupid. This time, as soon as the voice rang out, it abruptly stopped. Luo Qingtong sneered and pinched the mouth of the little pig in her arms. She pinched its jaw and said with a fake smile, "Do you think I'm blind and can't see your mouth moving? Do you feel good scolding me? Scolding me for being a stupid woman?" Luo Qingtong narrowed her pair of black and empty eyes. Her little face was covered in blood and dirt, but her smile was indescribably sweet. However, Little Pig's animal instinct told him that there was a hidden danger behind that smile. I. Why will you? You can't do this to me. I'm an ancient mythical pig. I'm telling you, you'll regret killing me. It shouted fiercely, thinking that Luo Qingtong would let it go because of this. However, it didn't expect the girl to tighten her grip even more. Ancient mythical pig. I think you're more like a pig demon. Feeling Luo Qingtong's unhesitant and weakened killing intent, Little Pig was completely terrified. Whoa. I was wrong. I'm your contracted beast now. You can't strangle me. Otherwise, your own strength will be greatly damaged. Really? It tried its best to save itself. Its two short and fat little hooves hugged Luo Qingtong's hand and cried desperately. Humph. I'll deal with you later. Luo Qingtong thought of the sudden dizziness she felt before and was skeptical of the pig's words. Seeing that the silver-robed men were already charging towards her, she couldn't be bothered to waste any more words with it. She directly stuffed it into her sleeve, flicked her sleeves, and rushed forward. That was a dense forest that she had her eyes on. It was the most suitable place for an ambush. Today, she was going to play these people to death, one by one. How dare they chase after her? Luo Qingtong's eyes narrowed slightly. Streaks of blood-red light flashed through her empty eyes from time to time. That blood-stained little face had a bloodthirsty and sweet smile. It's been a long time since I've been so excited. Ever since she became famous as the Evil Eye, no one was able to force her to this step. She was going to play with these people. Luo Qingtong lightly licked her lips. Under the guidance of her dark red eyes, she dashed into the dense forest in a few flashes. In a flash, Luo Qingtong's figure appeared in a blind spot that was extremely good to hide in but hard to be discovered. Chapter 15. The little pig that was stuffed into Luo Qingtong's sleeve popped its head out of her sleeve. Then, it was stunned by Luo Qingtong's smooth movements, as if she was showing off her skills. What shocked him even more was the things that Luo Qingtong had made. Caw. In the blink of an eye, Luo Qingtong had assembled a small crossbow from the cut parts. It looked simple and crude, but its structure was extremely exquisite. It was the pinnacle of cold weapons in the 24th century. This crossbow was cross-shaped and could be tied to her left arm. Once she covered it with her wide sleeve, it would disappear without a trace. There were 5 slots on the crossbow, just enough for 5 arrows to be placed. 2 switches could be pulled to shoot simultaneously, or 1 arrow could be fired in succession. It could be said that this crossbow was a killing weapon that maximized its lethality and dexterity. Little Pig had never seen such a thing before. Since when could weapons from the mortal world be so skillful and dexterous? Only a weapon refiner would be able to compare to this skill, right? While Little Pig was still in shock, Luo Qingtong had already taken out the jade hairpin from her hair bun and held it in her hand. The showtime. Luo Qingtong placed her index finger on her lips and smiled wickedly and bloodthirstily. In the next second, she jumped down from the treetops and chased after the silver-clothed men. Let her have a counter-hunt. Swoosh! While Luo Qingtong was chasing after the silver-clothed men, the latter also rushed into the forest. Spread out and search. You must catch that woman. Yes. The group of people responded in unison. Then, they spread out in all directions of the dense forest. Their formation was very well trained and the location they chose was perfect to block all escape routes in the forest. As long as Luo Qingtong was in the forest, there was no way she could escape from their encirclement and search. What they didn't know was that Luo Qingtong was waiting for them to scatter. Do not enter the forest. It seems like these people don't understand this principle. Luo Qingtong watched the movements of these people with smiling eyes. In that instant, even the bloodstains on her face couldn't hide her peerless beauty and peerless allure. Shwa! Without making a sound, she flew above the head of a silver-robed man who was the furthest away from the others. That was a blind spot for everyone. In the next second, her figure was like a ghost as she instantly pounced down. Oh! Just as the silver-robed man sensed that there was something wrong with the airflow around him and was about to turn around to check, a jade hairpin that flickered with cold light had already pierced into the back of his head. In an instant, it pierced through his forehead. In Luo Qingtong's eyes, the silver-clothed man's entire body was surging with energy. His weak points were all under her control. In terms of strength, she was indeed no match for these people in a true head-on clash. However, in terms of assassination, the lives of these people were completely in her hands. Puff! She raised the jade hairpin in her hand. Luo Qingtong raised her hand to catch the black-clothed man's body that had fallen to the ground. Her palm covered the man's wide-open eyes that were filled with fear. She wiped them and closed them. Shwa! She placed them under the big tree and slightly narrowed her eyes. She raised her hand to touch the silver-clothed man's waist. Whoosh! The other silver-clothed men were all alarmed by the sharp warning sound. Over there! The silver-clothed man closest to her rushed over. Chapter 16. Number 6. Seeing the corpse of the man in silver who was the first to arrive was shocked and quickly ran over to check. Just as he was about to touch number 6 corpse, a cold murderous intent instantly locked onto him. Oh no! Alarm bells rang in his head. The silver-robed man's body came to a halt. The moment the murderous intent surged, he quickly rolled to the side. With such reaction speed, he should be able to dodge even an assassination attack at close range. However, the man in silver did not expect that the cold murderous intent would be even faster than his speed. Caw! With a soft sound that was almost inaudible, an arrow flew out at high speed. Just as the man in silver dodged, another arrow flew out from the air and collided with the tail of the previous arrow. With a puff, the tail of the arrow was hit and instantly changed its trajectory. In the next second, under the silver-robed man's horrified gaze, the arrow hit his weak point right below his right rib, right where his weak point was. At the same time, a graceful and charming figure flashed past his line of sight in an instant. A jade hairpin instantly killed him by cutting his throat. Bang! The silver-robed man's body swayed, and he fell to the ground with his eyes wide open. Number 13. The remaining men in silver rushed over and saw number 13's body fall to the ground. Luo Qingtong's figure flashed in their line of sight and disappeared without a trace. Even with their eyesight and strength, they were unable to see her whereabouts and trajectory. Was she still a martial master? Was this the strength a martial master should have? The group of men were shocked and furious. Their hearts were filled with a chill. Normally, they would not even take a martial master seriously. They would be crushed to death with just a lift of their hand. But now, they were frightened by Luo Qingtong. Let's go. The leading silver-clothed man made a prompt decision and gave the order. The person they were facing was not an ordinary person. Luo Qingtong's change must be reported to the master immediately. However, his words did not receive any response. Are you calling them? A sweet voice came from behind him at this moment. The leader of the silver-robed men suddenly turned around and saw the girl in blood-red clothes appear behind him. She raised her hand and pushing the subordinates behind him to the ground. The men's eyes were wide open and their bodies were stiff. They did not know when they had died. As for him, he did not feel anything at all. Thinking of this, the leader in silver felt a chill run down his back. He looked at Luo Qingtong as if he had seen a ghost. How did she do it? A mere martial master could kill them all as if they were dogs. Shouldn't it be the other way around? The silver-robed leader's mind was in a mess. Looking at Luo Qingtong, who was smiling sweetly in front of him, he almost thought that he remembered wrongly. A martial master should be more powerful than a martial general. But in reality, a martial master could only be considered as someone who had just stepped onto the path of martial arts. On the path of martial arts, martial disciples, martial artists, martial masters, martial generals, and great martial generals. A little higher was a martial marquis. A marquis could rule over a region. In any small country, they could become a marquis. And above that, a martial king could directly establish a country. The entire eastern border country was founded by an inferior martial king. It had continued to this day. The ranks of a martial master could not be surpassed. Chapter 17. The scene that subverted common sense appeared in front of him. For a moment, the leader in silver forgot to react. He looked at Luo Qingtong in shock and horror. What? You don't want to escape. You want to stay and accompany them. Luo Qingtong looked at him. She raised her hand to remove the arrows and jade hairpins from the bodies of the two men in silver who had just died under her hands. She slowly wiped the bloodstains on them. She tilted her head and smiled. That smile was indescribably sweet and enchanting. It was mixed with a young girl's childishness and a peerless enchanting aura. It was very alluring. She was like a blooming poppy. When the leader in silver heard her words, he instantly quivered. As if he had just reacted, he hurriedly turned around and fled. The other party had already killed several of his subordinates in front of him. Now that he was the only one left, he was even less of a match. However, he had just run 2 steps when he heard a sigh behind him. AI. Really stupid. You make people lose interest in killing people. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and aimed at the back of the fleeing man in silver. She pulled the trigger of the crossbow in her hand. Her strength was actually not as good as the other party. The leader of the fleeing silver-robed men was much stronger than the other silver-robed men. If he disregarded everything and fought Luo Qingtong to the death, he would definitely be able to escape. After all, after killing 2 people and then killing several people in succession, Luo Qingtong's crossbow was already empty. What's more, the other party was much stronger than her. Even if Luo Qingtong knew the other party's strength and weaknesses, she was still no match for him. However, she used her words to suppress the man in silver. The latter was frightened by her aura when she killed several people in succession. After she spoke, he subconsciously retreated. When he realized that he didn't need to run at all and that the one who should be afraid was Luo Qingtong, it was already too late. Swish 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 swish. Luo Qingtong reloaded the crossbow in her hand. In an instant, 5 arrows were shot in succession. 1 arrow hit the other. The arrow at the front was like a flying feather. With a whoosh, it pierced through the silver-clothed leader's life-gate chi shield. In the next second, Luo Qingtong's figure leaped up, and the jade hairpin in her hand fell down, directly nailing the silver-robed man to death under a big tree in front of them. Buzz! The jade hairpin pierced through the silver-clothed man's forehead and entered the large tree. The tail of the jade hairpin trembled continuously, like a fluttering white jade butterfly. Luo Qingtong landed gracefully. Done! She clapped her hands with a smile. This series of actions was extremely clean and efficient, and it was extremely coherent, not giving the other party any chance to escape. In the dark, Yi Qianqian's figure was hidden in midair. He stared at Luo Qingtong's moves without blinking. His eyes were deep. He looked at Luo Qingtong with flickering eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. He chased after that thing's aura, but he didn't expect to see such an unexpected scene. 5 martial generals, one of which was even a peak martial general, were slaughtered like chickens and dogs. If the one who attacked was a great martial general, this result wouldn't be surprising. However, if it was a martial master, it couldn't help but surprise him. Although this kind of battle was child's play to Yi Qianxian, it was like a fight between ants. However, the crossbow in Luo Qingtong's hands aroused his great interest. Even Little Pig could see that the crossbow in Luo Qingtong's hands was extraordinary. How could Yi Qianxian not see it? The craftsmanship of this crossbow was truly exquisite. It was comparable to a treasured weapon refined by a weapon refiner. However, there wasn't a trace of energy fluctuation. It was obvious that even if an ordinary person used it, with its powerful mobility, dexterity, and lethality, it wouldn't be a problem to deal with a martial artist. This woman could actually casually create such a powerful killing weapon? Yi Qianxian sized up Luo Qingtong. Chapter 18. Because he saw that after Luo Qingtong killed the leader of the silver-robed men, she pounced on him and began to touch him from top to bottom. That's right, she was touching him from top to bottom. Yi Qianxian looked coldly at the other party as she smiled and plunged her tender little hands directly into the silver-robed man's chest. Didn't this woman know that men and women should not touch each other, and strangers should not come close? Or did she not even let the dead off? As long as they had a slightly better figure, she would take advantage of them. Yi Qianxian couldn't help but recall the scene of him being threatened and forced by Luo Qingtong in the healing spring. His expression immediately turned gloomy. This woman. She even said that it was an accident. God knows that Luo Qingtong was really wrongly accused. How was she taking advantage of them? She was searching them. The identities of these silver-robed men were not simple. Now that they were dead, she naturally had to search them to see if she could find any clues and plunder some good things at the same time. However, because of the previous series of bad impressions, coupled with Yi Qianxian's honorable status, he would almost never conduct such a body search. Thus, he immediately regarded her actions as lust. He didn't know why, but when he saw Luo Qingtong's lecherous expression, he felt a burst of irritation in his heart. Swish! Yi Qianxian's figure suddenly appeared beside Luo Qingtong. Oh, what is this? Luo Qingtong had just found something and was about to examine it carefully when she suddenly felt that there was one more person beside her. Her heart was fiercely startled. She instantly put the thing she had found into her bosom and was about to jump away. However, just as she was about to move, a powerful aura instantly opened up a barrier and firmly enveloped the space around her. Bang! Luo Qingtong's back crashed heavily into a wall of air. Still want to run? His cold voice was filled with obvious anger. Luo Qingtong's heart suddenly jumped. She looked up with a dry smile and greeted the man in front of her. Hey, handsome. What a coincidence, haha, we meet again. Yi Qianxian looked at her coldly. Suddenly, he raised his hand and grabbed at her. His target was the little pig in her sleeve. Luo Qingtong thought he was here for revenge. Hey, hey. Handsome, if you have something to say, we can talk it out. Don't fight. I already said that it was a mistake. Do you have to be so relentless? Luo Qingtong's heart tightened when she saw the man's hand coming for her. Almost subconsciously, she activated her pupil technique to the extreme. In the blink of an eye, all kinds of flows of air and strength in the surrounding space appeared in her eyes. In the next second, Luo Qingtong's figure abruptly darted away, dodging Yi Qianxian's grab and fleeing to the rear. Unknowingly, she had actually bypassed the air wall that was blocking her back previously. Seeing Luo Qingtong's action, Yi Qianxian's eyes flashed fiercely. This woman had too many secrets. She could even break through his aura seal. Yi Qianxian finally got serious. Swoosh! Just when Luo Qingtong thought she had escaped, Yi Qianxian took a step forward. The distance of several zhang was instantly shortened by his step. It was as if he was so close yet so far away. Yi Qianxian's figure appeared directly beside Luo Qingtong, who was fleeing at high speed. It was as if he hadn't been far from her from the beginning. His hand grabbed at Luo Qingtong. The strong wind carried with it an unparalleled aura. Compared to the silver-clothed men, this aura was like the 5 sacred mountains to the earth slope, the high mountains and flowing rivers to the mountain stream, and the colossus to the ants and worms. Chapter 19. Strong. Too strong. Luo Qingtong had never met anyone like Yi Qianxian in the 24th century's ability world. She didn't even have the slightest hope of winning. What kind of place was this world? Luo Qingtong's eyes flashed with blood-red light. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't see through Yi Qianxian's weakness. Damn it! Was she going to be caught by this man? Luo Qingtong bit her lip. Suddenly, her eyes flashed and the corners of her lips curled up. When Yi Qianxian's hand reached for her, she didn't move forward but instead moved backward. She leaned against Yi Qianxian's body. At the same time, she retracted her aura. Luo Qingtong was running in front when Yi Qianxian's figure appeared beside her. But after her figure paused and retreated, the young girl's soft body crashed into Yi Qianxian's broad chest. In an instant, the two of them hugged each other. Yi Qianxian was caught off guard and his body stiffened. Before he could react, Luo Qingtong raised her head and hooked her arms around his neck. Her face was enchanting and charming as she welcomed him. "Handsome, you're so persistent. Don't tell me you've fallen in love with me." "All right. Although I'm not a casual person, you're so outstanding. I'll reluctantly accept you," Luo Qingtong said as she moved to kiss Yi Qianxian. The man didn't expect her to be so bold. Before Luo Qingtong, he had never been so close to a woman. Not to mention, the other party dared to ignore his aura and directly kiss him. Feeling the sweet fragrance exhaled from Luo Qingtong's lips, and then looking at the rapidly approaching pink lips, Yi Qianming's figure almost instantly shot backwards. At the same time, he waved his sleeves. "How dare you!" His face was angry. But just as he waved his sleeves, the girl's bell-like laughter instantly rose with the wind. Following the force of his wave, she quickly leaped backward. "Ha! Handsome, I didn't expect you to be so pure." Luo Qingtong turned back and winked at him. She put her index finger on her lips and sent him a flying kiss. Her eyes were curved with a smile. "Thank you for sending me off. Bye-bye." As she spoke, she laughed and waved her sleeves. Her figure suddenly turned into a ghost-like trace, following the force of Yi Qianxian's sleeve and quickly moved away. Damn it! This woman. The moment Luo Qingtong's voice sounded, Yi Qianxian immediately reacted. His face darkened. He was deceived by this cunning and fickle woman again. Luo Qingtong's kiss was to make him push her away. With Yi Qianxian's strength, if he didn't voluntarily let go, Luo Qingtong would have no chance of escaping. This woman, she deliberately kissed him. So that he would let go. As Yi Qianxian thought about it, he felt a wave of shame and anger. But at the same time, a strange feeling arose in his heart. There seemed to be a faint girl's breath lingering on his lips. Just now, that kiss had come too suddenly. His lips and Luo Qingtong seemed to have brushed against each other in an instant. At the same time, his hands seemed to have the warm and soft touch of a woman's body. This was the most cunning and daring woman he had ever seen. But did she think she could escape like this? Chapter 20. Oh my god. Oh my god, I was scared to death just now. Luo Qingtong patted her chest as she ran. That man's aura was too strong. She thought she wouldn't be able to escape this time. Recalling the things she did to that man, Luo Qingtong patted her chest and rejoiced. Little Pig, who was hiding in her sleeve and didn't even dare to fart, was also dumbfounded. F***ck. This woman is too daring. You were scared, but you still dared to tease him. What kind of weird brain circuit is this? It said in disbelief. If I didn't tease him, should I wait for death? Luo Qingtong said angrily. That man was so strong, of course I had to use extreme methods. However, not bad. She licked her lips and smiled evilly. Such a strong and handsome man was really her cup of tea. Unfortunately, he's too strong, so I can't touch him. Messing with this kind of man is a big trouble. Luo Qingtong thought about it and calmed down. Before Little Pig could say anything, Luo Qingtong had already grabbed it and jumped to the top of a 1,000-year-old ancient tree. This place was far enough away from that place, so there shouldn't be any problems. Okay, now you can tell me what the hell you are. Luo Qingtong grabbed Little Pig's neck and pulled it closer to her. A talking pig demon. She flicked Little Pig's butt. Ah! Little Pig covered its butt with its two hind legs and stared at her with its beady eyes. You're the pig demon. I'm the ancient divine pig. Do you know the ancient divine pig? It bristled with anger. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes and looked at it. Ancient divine pig. You. She looked at the pink pig from head to toe. She really didn't know where its confidence came from. If the ancient divine beasts were like it, they would all commit suicide. Don't look down on me. I'm just being sealed. Humph. Little Pig proudly stuck out his round little belly. You don't know how powerful I used to be. He was known as the #1 pig in the world. Even the divine dragon Phoenix has to call me Grandpa Pig when it sees me. Pfft. Luo Qingtong couldn't help but laugh. The #1 pig in the world. She was going to die from laughter. Little Pig panicked when he saw her like this. I really am an ancient divine pig. Only ancient divine beasts could directly sign a heaven and earth contract with humans. Ignore level. Don't tell me you don't know this common sense. Luo Qingtong really didn't know about these things. She was inexplicably brought here, and she didn't even understand what was going on in this world. Also, her body was obviously not hers. Wait a minute. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong suddenly jumped down from the treetops. She found a pool and washed the blood off her face. Phew. Luckily, it's still my original face. What Luo Qingtong was most afraid of was that if her body and face changed, would it still be her? However, she was relieved now. This face was exactly the same as her original face. After so many years, she was still the most used to her own face. Moreover, Luo Qingtong used to be a devastatingly beautiful woman. There was no need for her to change her face. She was very satisfied with her current appearance. However, she didn't know the identity of this body. As Luo Qingtong pondered, she suddenly remembered the things she found from the silver-clothed leader. Perhaps she could find some clues. Chapter 21. It was a token made of a special material. It was shining with a cold metallic luster, but she didn't know what material it was made of. There was a strange totem pattern engraved on the token. In addition, there was a big word "dark" on it. What's this? Luo Qingtong looked at the token. She didn't know what it was and what it meant. Just as she frowned and was about to put it away, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head. A strong consciousness suddenly rose from the depths of her mind. Tianyu Empire. Secret Guard Token. It's them. It's them who set me up. Tianyu Empire, if you are not satisfied with the engagement between UNMO and me, you can break it off. Why do you set me up like this? Why? That consciousness made a ruckus in Luo Qingtong's mind. The mournful cry almost made Luo Qingtong's head explode. The sobbing and mournful voice made Luo Qingtong's head ache. In the next second, countless memories flooded into his mind like a flood that had been opened from a dam. In an instant, Luo Qingtong's consciousness was filled to the brim. Soon, she understood everything. It turned out that this body also belonged to a woman named Luo Qingtong. However, compared to her strong and unscrupulous personality, this woman named Luo Qingtong was not so lucky. She was the first miss of the Marquis Mansion Luo family in the inferior Dongli country. She was the first genius of the Luo family and the first beauty of the Dongli country. However, she was betrayed by the third miss of the Luo family, Luo Xining, the daughter of a concubine of the second branch whom she regarded as her own sister. In the end, her dantian was destroyed, her cultivation was lost, and her eyes were blinded by poison. She was thrown to a group of people who didn't know what kind of people they were. If Luo Qingtong hadn't transmigrated over at the right time and killed those black-robed men, and even killed those silver-robed men who were monitoring in the dark, her fate would have been extremely tragic. Scenes flashed through Luo Qingtong's mind. It turned out that Luo Qingtong had taken good care of Luo Xining. She had nurtured her frail body and helped her develop her martial arts talent. She had even taught her how to cultivate step by step. She had even shared her own resources with her to help her improve her strength. Luo Xining in the picture was as pure as a white lotus. Unfortunately, the heart of this white lotus was filthy black. Luo Qingtong looked at the scene in her mind and memories flashed past. That Luo Xining stood in front of that Luo Qingtong and destroyed her cultivation and blinded her. After that, he said that her life was too good. There were too many benefits to dealing with her, so he had no choice but to do it. Good. Very good. Luo Qingtong's vacant eyes flashed with a strange bloody light. So everything that she had to face after transmigrating was all because of this woman. Luo Xining, right? I'll remember you. I like sluts like you. I like to torture sluts like you. Luo Qingtong's smile was as red as blood. She didn't care how stupid the original body was. She had kept this snake beauty who obviously had evil intentions by her side. She even had her cultivation and eyes destroyed when she was breaking through. But now, she was the one who had taken over this body. She would never allow anyone to humiliate her. Chapter 22. And the royal family of the Tianyu Empire, the Yuan family. Luo Qingtong stared at the secret guard token in her hand. From her memories, she knew that this body was engaged to the fifth prince, UNMO, who was the pride of their empire. The Tianyu Empire was an emperor-level super country, which was totally different from the inferior Dongli country. Not to mention the Luo family of the Marquis of Dongli country. No one knew why UNMO would be engaged to such an inferior country's Marquis Mansion's eldest miss. After all, UNMO was a genius with outstanding strength and talent. He was definitely the number one person in the Tianyu Empire. But who knew that when UNMO was born, he was even worse than a loser. He was weak and sick, born with cold energy. He was doomed to be unable to cultivate for the rest of his life. It was the host's mother who saved his life and helped him remove the disease in his body, making him a genius. From then on, he had a meteoric rise. But how did the Yuan family treat the host? After the host's mother disappeared, they immediately wanted to break off the engagement. Now they even sent people to bribe Luo Xining to kill the host. Why did they destroy her cultivation and eyes, throw her out to be raped, and then hang her at the city gate? Because the Yuan family wanted to break off the engagement in a justifiable way. They couldn't leave any stain on Yuan Mo. What could give them a better reason to break off the engagement than destroying Luo Qingtong? Even if the engagement was cancelled, it would always be Luo Qingtong who was in a bad spot, not Yuan Mo. After all, how could a woman who had lost both her reputation and cultivation be worthy of the fifth prince, who was favored by the heavens? Luo Qingtong thought, and the smile on her face deepened. These people were great. That's great. God's favored one. Ha! She would let them know that the so-called genius was worthless in front of her. I haven't been so excited for a long time. The last time was when she killed the vice president of the Special Ability Assassination Union and the others who had come to kill her. She spent nearly a month to kill the most powerful people in the Esper Assassination Union one by one. This time wouldn't be an exception. It didn't matter how much time she had to spend. Luo Qingtong's personality was very evil. She didn't care how Luo Xining and the Tianyu imperial family treated the host. She wasn't the host before. But after she transmigrated, she was annoyed. Especially when she was chased after by the men in silver, causing her to accidentally enter that man's healing spring water and offend him. Of course, Luo Xining and the royal family of Tianyu had to be blamed for this. Whoosh! Putting away the secret guard token in her hand, Luo Qingtong jumped up to the top of the tree. This was the treasure trove of the wilderness. The terrain of the Nine Magi Mountain was steep, and the forest was treacherous. There were countless beasts and ferocious beasts within. However, it was also extremely rich in resources. Luo Qingtong's eyes were crippled. Although she could see things with her eye technique and was not much different from ordinary people, it was still inconvenient. Eyes, that's eyes, and I. If it was the Luo Qingtong in her prime, she wouldn't have cared about this. But now that she had just transmigrated, this body obviously hadn't cultivated any spiritual power. The amount of spiritual power she had was limited. It was tiring to maintain it for a long time, and it was also very unsafe. Luo Qingtong had to find a way to cure the poison in her eyes. The Nine Magi Mountain was the best place for her to find the antidote. Chapter 23. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and scraped off a drop of black poisonous water from the corner of her eye. Looking at the drop of poisonous water that fell on the tip of her index finger, the bloody light in Luo Qingtong's eyes swirled and suddenly became intense. Her bloody eyes looked particularly bewitching and evil, like a demon that bewitched people's hearts, coquettish and beautiful. Heavenly blood grass, double moon lotus, heartless dragon root. Under the gaze of Luo Qingtong's bewitching bloody eyes, the medicinal ingredients were analyzed by Luo Qingtong one by one. If someone was here and saw this scene, they would definitely cry out in amazement. Luo Qingtong's eyes were actually so powerful. Just by looking at the poisonous water, she was actually able to analyze the medicinal properties. What kind of monstrous and terrifying ability was this? One must know that there were prescriptions for refining medicine, and there were prescriptions for refining tools. No matter what it was, there was a unique secret manual. The prescriptions for refining medicine and refining tools were also the secrets of their respective sects and clans. Except for some common prescriptions that were circulated outside, the other prescriptions, especially those that were developed by their own sects, were the treasures of their respective sects. These were the secret recipes that they used to protect their sects and clan strength and status. And Luo Qingtong was actually able to see through the essence of it with just a glance. Didn't this mean that all the secret recipes were useless to her? In fact, this was indeed the case. Luo Qingtong's previous life's ranking in the 24th century's Esper ability assassination union was so high mainly because of this ability. This ability was the true essence of her eye ability. Any secret recipe, medicine, weapon, defense, under her eyes, nothing could hide. All the countries and organizations in the world coveted this ability of hers, but they were also afraid of this ability. Think about it, if you developed a new weapon or new medicine with great difficulty, or something else, she would be able to know the proportion of your recipe and grasp your manufacturing process. How frightening was that? Of course, if this ability was in her own hands, then it would be incomparably wonderful. Therefore, people both loved and hated Luo Qingtong's ability. Her ranking in the Esper Assassin Union also rose as her ocular technique improved day by day. In the end, it rose to the first place, and there was no change after that. TSK. It was the most poisonous medicine. Someone actually used such a thing to harm the original owner. What kind of grudge do you have against me? Luo Qingtong completely analyzed the composition of the poison and immediately raised her eyebrows. Not only was the toxicity of this poison strong, it was also very difficult to detoxify. In other words, this medicine was both a good cure and a powerful poison at the same time. All of this was orchestrated by the drug. The medicinal herbs that Luo Qingtong had analyzed all happened to reinforce and restrain each other. In the end, they formed a complete circle. If these herbs were arranged in a proper manner, they would reinforce each other, and they would be the best medicine for healing. However, if they were arranged in reverse order, then they would counter each other and become extremely poisonous. The same medicinal material could actually be medicine or poison. It was extremely difficult to concoct such a poison. Not only were the medicinal materials needed very picky, but the timing of adding them was also very strict. If it was slightly lacking, then it would be a failure. It was definitely not something that an ordinary alchemist could refine. Even the heavenly alchemists who were highly regarded by the world might not be able to refine it. How could Luo Xinning have such a powerful poison in her hands? This poison was so precious that even the entire Tianyu Empire might not be able to exchange for a drop of it, let alone Luo Xinning. Moreover, there was more than one drop in her eyes. Chapter 24. Things are getting more and more interesting. Luo Qingtong laughed coldly. This poison definitely did not belong to Luo Xinning. Even the royal family of the Tianyu Empire would not be able to produce it. It seemed like there was more to this matter than met the eye. It was not as simple as the Tianyu Empire breaking off the engagement. However, it did not matter. She was not afraid of trouble. She was only afraid that things would not be interesting enough. Otherwise, wouldn't it be too boring in such a big world? It would be too unfair for her to be reborn in this life. She would not let go of anyone who tried to harm her behind her back. Alright, since I know the ingredients of this poison, I will be able to detoxify it once I find the corresponding ingredients. This poison was indeed powerful to others. They might not be able to detoxify it in their entire lives. However, to Luo Qingtong, it was not a problem at all. This poison was difficult to detoxify because normal people would not be able to tell how many ingredients were in it, what their properties were, and what order they were added in. However, Luo Qingtong knew all of it. What was the point of detoxifying it? As long as she could find the right ingredients and refine them according to the order, the poison would be detoxified immediately. As she thought about it, Luo Qingtong lifted her hand and shook off the drop of poisonous water. Then, she dashed into the depths of the Nine Magi Mountain. She hoped that there were the ingredients she needed here. Moments after Luo Qingtong left, Yi Qianxian, who had been chasing after her, appeared. Swoosh! He appeared at the place where Luo Qingtong had been. Sensing the lingering aura, he frowned. He was a step too late. He did not know how Luo Qingtong was able to find the perfect place to hide every time. Even with his spiritual perception, he could not find such a blind spot in a short period of time. A mere martial master was actually able to avoid the search of his divine sense time and time again. If this were to spread, it would be shocking. The more Yi Qianxian searched for Luo Qingtong, the more he felt that she was hiding many secrets. This woman was like a treasure trove hidden in thick fog. Every time, she could bring him a different feeling and surprise. Unknowingly, the anger in Yi Qianxian's heart subsided. Instead, it was filled with curiosity and curiosity. He glanced around and suddenly saw the drop of poisonous water that Luo Qingtong had thrown onto a leaf. This is the ultimate medicine and poison. Most people would not be able to sense the spiritual energy contained in that drop of poisonous water. However, Yi Qianxian was not one of them. Looking at the drop of poisonous water, Yi Qianxian's eyes flashed. He thought of Luo Qingtong's eyes. Could it be that she was blind? She was actually poisoned by someone. What was the identity of that woman? Could it be that she wasn't from Dongli country? That's right, with all the abilities she's shown, she doesn't seem like someone from this low-level country. Thinking of this, Yi Qianxian moved and headed in the direction that Luo Qingtong had disappeared. However, he didn't know that it was because of this misunderstanding that he couldn't find Luo Qingtong for a long time. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Luo Qingtong's figure moved quickly in the deep forest. With her eye technique, Luo Qingtong could enter and exit the depths of the 9 Magi Mountains as she wished. As long as there were powerful demonic beasts, she could detect them in advance and easily avoid them. Every place she went was a blind spot in the terrain. It was safe and not easy to be discovered. As Luo Qingtong moved, she looked up and scanned her surroundings. Wherever the dark red light from her eyes passed, all the spirit herbs were exposed to her eyes. The age and medicinal properties of the herbs were revealed. However, to Luo Qingtong's disappointment, along the way, she did not find a single herb that was useful for treating her eyes. It was obvious that the herbs used to make the ultimate medicine and poison were not ordinary. Correspondingly, the herbs that could cure the poison were also very difficult to find. It was very likely that there weren't any in the depths of the 9 Magi Mountains. Tisk, troublesome. It seemed that she had to think of another way. Luo Qingtong thought and prepared to leave. Chapter 25. Rumble. Luo Qingtong's senses were extremely sharp. When she sensed that something was wrong in front of her, a deafening sound could be heard in an instant. At the same time, a fishy smell assailed her nostrils. Even though they were separated by hundreds of feet and countless huge trees and long grass, that fishy smell was like a violent storm, assaulting her face. Swish! It was like a sharp blade cutting through the air. Wherever that smell passed, the huge trees collapsed and the long grass fell, revealing the scene in front of her. Luo Qingtong's pupils fiercely shrank. She saw countless huge pythons twisting together to form a huge ball of meat, rushing towards her. Their forked tongues, triangular heads, ferocious eyes, and huge intertwined bodies all showed how terrifying these pythons were. Rank 3 demonic beasts. Luo Qingtong watched the huge pythons, which were nearly 100 feet long, twisting and rolling towards her. The whole mountain was filled with snakes. This scene was enough to make a martial marquis expert's scalp numb. A rank 3 demonic python like this could easily kill a martial master. Even ordinary martial artists had to be careful when facing them. Now, there were more than 100 of them here. Such a huge number of pythons were chasing after one person. Ah! Don't chase me. Don't. Running in front of the huge pythons was a young boy. His eyes were filled with tears as he ran and sobbed. It was obvious that he was very scared. Streaks of tears hung on his delicate, jade-like face. His eyelashes were trembling rapidly, as if he would cry out loud in the next moment. The young boy was about 8 or 9 years old. He was wearing luxurious clothes and a precious jade pendant hung on his waist. All the accessories on his body, including his clothes, were spiritual weapons. At this moment, all of them were shining brightly, resisting the attacks from the huge pythons. It could be seen that these spiritual tools were not just for show. But there were too many pythons. No matter how many spiritual weapons he had, they could not withstand this kind of consumption. The light was already very weak. The young boy was crying as he ran towards Luo Qingtong. His footsteps were staggering, as if he would fall in the next moment. At this moment, he saw Luo Qingtong and his eyes suddenly widened. "I'm immortal, sister." Wherever the python passed, the tall grass and huge trees would fall. Luo Qingtong saw him, and naturally, he also saw Luo Qingtong. At a distance of nearly 100 feet, Luo Qingtong's face, which was as beautiful as a fairy from the ninth heaven, directly entered the young boy's eyes. At this moment, she was looking at the young boy and the group of giant pythons with a cold expression, but she didn't know how much of an impact her appearance had on the young boy. She must be a fairy. That was why he was able to face so many third-rank demonic beasts so calmly. The young man was pleasantly surprised and was about to run over to call for help. However, when he met Luo Qingtong's empty and vacant eyes, he suddenly froze. Then he saw the bloodstains and tears on Luo Qingtong's pink robe. So it wasn't that fairy sister wasn't afraid, but that she couldn't see. Why was she here? Could it be that he was also assassinated? Thinking of this, the young man's footsteps suddenly stopped. He clenched his teeth and his eyes filled with tears. Finally, he suddenly shook his head and ran towards the other side. "Fairy sister. Quickly run. I will lead these pythons away. Quickly run. Run forward, don't look back." The young boy's voice was very trembling. The spiritual weapons on his body could not resist for much longer. If he used Luo Qingtong to block them, he might be able to find a chance to escape. However, he was a pure person and was not willing to harm others for himself. In any case, he might not be able to survive in the end, so he didn't want to harm others. Chapter 26. Luo Qingtong looked at the direction the youth ran and raised her eyebrows. Just now, she was already prepared to kill. Even facing the youth, she was full of murderous intent. If the other party dared to rush in front of her and use her as a shield, she would definitely finish him off directly. But she didn't expect that the youth would run away after looking at her, and even lead the giant pythons away. It seemed that he didn't deliberately lead the giant pythons here, nor did he have the intention to use her as a shield. It was just a mistake. Unfortunately, it was too late. Luo Qingtong sniffed the remaining faint smell in the air and narrowed her eyes. This smell would cause the demonic beasts to go crazy and chase after the other party. Obviously, this was the reason why the youth was being chased by these demonic pythons. At this moment, because of the fishy wind just now, a lot of this smell had already contaminated Luo Qingtong's body. Even though the youth had stopped in time and led the giant pythons away, but there were still many giant pythons that followed the smell and rushed towards Luo Qingtong. Obviously, she was also a target. Troublesome. Luo Qingtong frowned and her figure swept in an instant. Swish. She rushed to the place where the youth left. In order to get rid of these giant pythons, the matter still had to fall on the youth's body. If she guessed correctly, the youth should have taken some kind of drug that could stimulate these giant pythons to go crazy, so that his body emitted that kind of attractive and tempting aura, causing these giant pythons to chase after him relentlessly, vowing to swallow him into their stomachs. In order to get rid of this aura, she had to get rid of the drug in his body. Swish! Luo Qingtong rushed towards those giant pythons that were rushing over. Under the gaze of her eyes, the weak points of these giant pythons were as dazzling as the lights in the dark night. The jade hairpin in her hand swept through the air. A giant python screamed tragically in an instant. Its body was more than 10 meters long. It rolled and twisted violently in the air, knocking several giant pythons next to it away. Luo Qingtong's expression was relaxed as she dashed out of the huge gap in their encirclement and headed in the direction the youth ran. Before she left, she didn't forget to pluck a few stalks of herbs from under a big tree nearby. Hiss! By the time she arrived, the spirit tool on the youth's body could no longer support him. The defensive light of the spirit artifact disappeared, and he was heavily tripped by the strong wind created by the tail of a giant python that swept from behind him. Woo! Wah! Looking at the huge python head rushing over, the young boy's face was filled with fear. But even so, he forced himself not to cry for help. He knew that no one could save him in the depths of the forest. The tears on the young boy's face flowed out, and his white jade-like face was washed with wet streaks. He looked so pitiful and adorable. His lips were bitten so hard that they bled. Just when the young man's heart was filled with despair, a cool breeze suddenly swept past with a whoosh. His waist was violently grabbed, and in the next second, his entire body was lifted into the air. "I'm immortal, sister." Looking at the peerless beauty in front of him in shock, the young man was completely stunned. Perhaps because he was saved, Luo Qingtong gave the young man a great shock. She was like a ray of light, giving hope to the hopeless young man in the darkness of the road ahead. Wah! Immortal sister. The young man hugged Luo Qingtong and cried loudly, as if he was hugging his last salvation. Luo Qingtong originally saved him in passing, but who would have thought that the young man would act as if he had seen his family, fiercely hugging her and crying loudly. This unguarded and intimate appearance made Luo Qingtong stare blankly. If it weren't for the fact that there was no image of this little guy in her memory, Luo Qingtong would have thought that the other party didn't recognize her. Wasn't this too unguarded? Didn't he suspect that she might have been sent by his enemy? Chapter 27. Okay, it's okay. Luo Qingtong wasn't very good at comforting people, but this little guy was crying so miserably in her arms, it seemed a bit unreasonable to leave him alone like this. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong patted the little boy's back and stuffed a few herbs she had picked before into his mouth. Chew a few times and then swallow. Okay. The boy nodded with tears in his eyes. He had just experienced a life and death situation, so hugging Luo Qingtong was like hugging his last life-saving straw. But even so, he still tried to force himself not to hug Luo Qingtong too tightly, so as not to interfere with Luo Qingtong's actions. Fairy sister, thank you. The smell of the herbs was very unpleasant. The little boy had been pampered since childhood, so he had never smelled such a strong smell. But even so, he didn't hesitate at all. He chewed up the herbs Luo Qingtong gave him and swallowed them. Then, he carefully leaned against Luo Qingtong's arms and hugged her with his small hands. Luo Qingtong could feel his body trembling. He was obviously very scared, but he endured it and didn't cry out. He was so well behaved that Luo Qingtong couldn't immediately abandon him. Forget it, since she had already saved him, she might as well send the Buddha to the west. Give me the defensive spiritual tool on your body, she said to the little boy. There were too many pythons, and they were desperately entangled. The drug in the little boy's body had already been neutralized, but there were still remnants in their bodies. She didn't know who wanted to kill him, but even if the smell of the drug had dissipated, the pythons would still go crazy for a while. Moreover, they were getting crazier and crazier. It seemed that the other party had already taken this little guy's detoxification situation into consideration. Luo Qingtong had to get rid of these pythons before they completely went crazy. Okay. The little boy didn't ask anything and directly took off all the defensive spiritual tools on his body, ready to give them to Luo Qingtong. He completely believed that Luo Qingtong was the girl who saved him from the mouth of the crazy pythons. If the other party really wanted to harm him, it would be fine if she didn't save him. Why bother? Fairy sister, here you go. He handed all the defensive spiritual tools in his hand to Luo Qingtong. There's no need for that. Take it. Do whatever I tell you to do later. Do you understand? Luo Qingtong's figure shuttled back and forth in the group of pythons. Her speed was very fast. Every landing point was perfect. One by one, the giant pythons rushed forward, but they were always just a hair's breadth away from biting her. So many pythons crisscrossing and crisscrossing, but they couldn't do anything to her. The little boy was dumbfounded. Fairy sister was too powerful. She must be God sent to save him. She must be. The little fellow looked at Luo Qingtong with admiration and nodded heavily at her words. Fairy sister, I will be obedient. Luo Qingtong didn't care about the little boy's address. Those pythons were getting faster and faster, and their berserk traces were getting more and more obvious. Originally, they were only rank 3 demonic beasts, but under the stimulation of the smell of the medicine, there was a tendency to transform into rank 4 demonic beasts. Even though she had the assistance of her eye technique, there were still pythons in front of her, forcing her to be unable to rush forward. If this continued, she would inevitably be trapped in the encirclement of the pythons, and be surrounded to death. Okay, now, start throwing. Luo Qingtong set a location, and let the little boy in her arms throw the defensive spiritual tool in his hand. The little boy didn't hesitate. When Luo Qingtong said that location, he directly threw the defensive spiritual tool in his hand. He didn't even ask why Luo Qingtong did this, nor did he ask why those defensive spiritual tools didn't even have spiritual qi, so what was the use of throwing them out? The little boy wholeheartedly believed in Luo Qingtong. He believed that this fairy sister, who was sent by God to save him, would definitely save him. Chapter 28. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Luo Qingtong's figure shuttled back and forth in the midst of the berserk giant pythons. At this moment, her path forward had already been blocked by the increasingly berserk giant pythons. She could only rely on her eye technique to maneuver around the encirclement of the giant pythons. If someone were here at this moment, they would definitely be stunned by Luo Qingtong's movements. It wasn't too fast, but too ingenious. One after another, giant pythons opened their ferocious mouths and attacked. Even a martial marquis expert would be flustered in the face of such an attack. In the end, they would be forced to stop by the giant pythons and use their strength to resist. However, Luo Qingtong's figure remained calm and unruffled. Even if the giant python's speed became faster and their aura became more and more berserk, and the space to dodge became smaller and smaller, she was still able to find a safe foothold in this continuous wave of berserk attacks. She just so happened to be able to avoid all the attacks. However, this scene wouldn't last for long. As the giant pythons became even more berserk, some of the giant pythons began to swarm forward without caring about whether they would hurt their companions. In this way, Luo Qingtong practically had no foothold to dodge. Fortunately, the task she had instructed the young man to do was more or less completed. When the last defensive spiritual weapon was thrown out, Luo Qingtong's eyes suddenly bloomed with a bloody glow. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. In the dark red glow of her eyes, the defensive spiritual weapons that were thrown out seemed to be restrained by an endless line. Finally, they completely converged into a huge array pattern. This pattern was extremely similar to the array that Yi Qianxian had set up when he was healing, but there were also obvious differences. Luo Qingtong had modified it a little, so that this array had both the effect of concealment and the ability to trap and kill. At this moment, relying on the spiritual weapons thrown out by the young man to form the eye of the array, she had impressively succeeded in setting it up. The reason why she had chosen this array was entirely because Yi Qianxian had previously set it up with trees and terrain, and it had such a strong concealment effect. Luo Qingtong only had defensive spiritual weapons with no spiritual energy that she could use. Naturally, she couldn't set up an array that was too strong. And if it was too weak, it might not be useful against these giant pythons. Therefore, she had chosen this array formation. At this moment, Luo Qingtong still didn't know that she had done such a shocking thing. Yi Qianxian had set up a 6th-level array formation. An ordinary spirit array master might not be able to successfully set up a spirit array even if they were to follow the steps of the spirit array master. Luo Qingtong had only gone in and out once, and she had set it up perfectly. Not only that, but she had also made changes. Such changes to the array formation. Only. Furthermore, she had changed a 6th-level array formation. Now, the Qinkuan singular Qi formation's effect was close to that of a 7th-grade formation. Although it wasn't the effect, it wasn't far away. If news of this were to spread, it would shake the entire world. Countless forces would flock here just to recruit her, a rare talent in array formations. Hold me tight. The moment the array formation was formed, Luo Qingtong shouted in a low voice. The young man, who had been holding her tightly, immediately used his hands and feet to hang on her body like a koala bear. At the same time, Luo Qingtong also let go of him and formed a seal with both hands. A force suddenly entered the main eye of the array formation at this moment. And the moment Luo Qingtong raised her hand, those giant pythons seemed to have foreseen danger and rushed towards her even more violently. Rumble. Chapter 29. Hiss. Amidst the violent hisses of the giant pythons, a huge formation diagram surged up and enveloped all the giant pythons around Luo Qingtong in an instant. Luo Qingtong carried the young boy and rushed out of the life gate of the formation. Behind her were countless rolling giant pythons and their bloody mouths. Bang! Luo Qingtong shot out a ray of light without looking back. The formation was instantly sealed after she rushed out. In an instant, the miserable hisses of the giant pythons were endless. Luo Qingtong didn't stay outside for too long. She leaped and flew away with the young boy. Although this formation was powerful, it was set up by a defensive spirit weapon that had no power. The energy needed to activate the formation was supported by the materials of the spirit weapon itself. It wouldn't be able to trap these giant pythons for long. However, it would be enough for them to leave as long as they could delay them for a while. The aura in the young boy's body had been removed. As long as they were far away from these giant pythons, they wouldn't chase after them. After a while, they would disperse. A few breaths after Luo Qingtong left, swoosh. Yi Qianxian's figure instantly appeared in the sky above this dense forest. The silver-clothed, black-haired man stood in the air, as dignified and noble as an ancient god. The powerful aura lingered around his body. Wherever he passed, there were no sounds of insects or birds. It was as if the entire world had become silent with the appearance of this man. I'm a step late again. He focused his eyes and sensed the remaining rich aura in the surroundings, indicating that the young girl had just left. Yi Qianxian's eyes scanned the surroundings and finally fixed on the concealment formation that trapped the giant pythons. This formation had the effect of concealing and trapping, but after all, Luo Qingtong had secretly learned it from Yi Qianxian. Others might not be able to detect it, but how could Yi Qianxian not be able to? Sensing the aura of the formation hidden in the void, Yi Qianxian's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. This is the Qinkuan Unity Formation. No, no. It wasn't the heaven and earth singular chi array. Although it was the Chinkuan singular chi formation's aura, there was obviously a huge difference. The aura emitted by this array formation was much stronger than the Chinkuan unison array. Was this done by that woman? Yi Qianqian's eyes flickered. He thought that he had overestimated that woman. But he didn't expect that every time he chased after her, she would give him such a huge surprise. The Chinkuan singular chi array was a level 6 array formation that he had created himself. Although it was just a boring work, there were less than 10 people in the world who could successfully set it up. Apart from himself, everyone else was an array formation grandmaster. But Luo Qingtong only went in and out once, and she actually saw through his array. Moreover, he had even modified it and arranged it. What kind of terrifying talent was this? Could it be that apart from being a weapon refiner, that woman was also a spirit array master? Regardless of whether it was an armament master or a spiritual array master, many forces and cultivators would scramble for them. Their statuses on the continent were extremely honorable. But those who could be good at both could be counted on one's fingers. Yi Qianxian searched through his memories, but he couldn't find anything that matched the characteristics of Luo Qingtong's cultivation. This woman was really a mystery. This was the first time that Yi Qianxian had a strong curiosity about a person. He really couldn't see through that woman. Just as Yi Qianxian was frowning slightly, with a boom, the spiritual weapon in the array formation below shattered. The array formation, which had lost its core, suddenly exploded. After nearly half of the giant pythons trapped in it had killed each other, the remaining dozens of giant pythons rushed out. Chapter 30. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The violent hissing sound seemed to resound in every part of the air. There were giant pythons in all directions. That huge body, either bent or stretched, rushed towards Yi Qianxian. Above the huge python head, there was a fierce and bloodthirsty look. Yi Qianxian looked at it indifferently, the expression on his face did not even change. Swish! It was as if a cool breeze blew past. In the next second, bang, bang, bang. The continuous sound of explosions resounded. Those giant pythons that rushed over, in an instant, seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible big hand, frozen in midair. Blood mist filled the sky. The bodies of those giant pythons, one by one, exploded. In just an instant, the sky was filled with rippling blood flowers. Dozens of giant pythons, which were violent enough to tear a peak martial marquis into pieces, were all destroyed in one breath. Swish! In the blood mist that filled the sky, Yi Qianqian's body was not tainted by a speck of dust. Like a peerless god high above, he looked at everything in front of him with cold and indifferent eyes. He paused for a moment, and then disappeared into the void under the backdrop of the blood rain and flesh flowers that filled the sky. In the air, only the extremely strong smell of blood was left, indicating that there had been an extreme massacre here. Swish, swish, swish. Luo Qingtong's figure swept through the dense forest. After dodging and activating the array just now, her physical strength was also slightly exhausted. Just as she swept to a safe place and was about to put down the little boy in her arms, she suddenly smelled a trace of blood in the air. Luo Qingtong suddenly lowered her head, and the delicate little face of the little boy in her arms, which was pale due to the loss of blood, bumped into her eyes. You're injured. Luo Qingtong frowned. Just now, she was only focused on carrying him away and did not notice that the little guy in her arms was injured. She put him down and found that the little boy's injury was on his shoulder, which was leaning against her waist. If it wasn't for this little fellow blocking the attack, she reckoned that the one who would be injured would be her. Luo Qingtong carefully recalled what had happened. She recalled the moment when they had rushed out of the array, those giant pythons had instantly gone berserk. Could it be that he was injured at that time? The wound on the little boy's shoulder was in a hideous tearing shape, and there was still a sharp pain on it. His consciousness was on the verge of blurring. If Luo Qingtong had not discovered it in time, he would have died silently just like that. Seriously. Why didn't you scream when you were injured? Luo Qingtong quickly put her down. With her sharp senses, if the other party had cried out or groaned when he was injured, she would have definitely noticed it. Just as she said this, she heard the faintly discernible murmurs from the unconscious youth. No. You can't scream. Will distract. Immortal. Sister. Can't. This string of words was completely unintentional. Jun Yinqing's hand paused, and he looked at the boy lying on the grass with a complicated expression. Was that why he didn't shout? Was he afraid of distracting her? For Luo Qingtong, saving the boy was just a matter of convenience. At that time, saving him from the pursuit of the group of pythons was the fastest. But she did not expect that the other party was so pure and kind that he would pay with his life just because she saved his life. Really silly to the point of being cute. Luo Qingtong muttered in her heart. How could anything happen to her? Those giant pythons changed their attacks again. As long as there was a glimmer of life, as long as they did not block all her escape routes like the man before, she would be able to escape in time. But he himself. The giant python's poison was extremely powerful. Coupled with the drug in his body that induced the giant pythons to go berserk, it instantly combined into another terrible poison. She was afraid that the person behind the scenes who had drugged him deliberately. Chapter 31. Luo Qingtong said, but her hands did not stop moving. She grabbed the young man's slender wrist and checked his pulse. She had to determine the composition of the poison in his body before she could prescribe the right medicine. Others checked the pulse by looking at the pulse. Only Luo Qingtong checked the pulse to see how many types of poison there were in a person's body. As long as there was a trace of life left in him, she would be able to pull him back even if he was sent to hell. Other than the evil eye, Luo Qingtong was also known as the evil Dr. Ghost Eye. However, when she finished checking the condition of the young man's body, her exquisite and beautiful face instantly turned cold. How unlucky was this young man? His body was as pitiful as a sieve. Other than the poison from the giant python and the medicine, there was also an old poison in his body. It was extremely insidious. The poison had blocked the young man's meridians and had almost melted them into a lump. It made his body look like a piece of trash. How could he be poisoned by such a poison? No wonder he looked like he came from an illustrious family and had so many spiritual weapons on him, but he did not have any strength. Logically speaking, a child from such a family should not be too weak. Yet, the young man was still being chased by a group of level 3 demonic pythons with all his spiritual weapons and had almost lost his life. Luo Qingtong frowned and looked at the young man for a long time. Then, she sighed, "Forget it, you're lucky to have met me." She let go of the young man's wrist and raised her head to scan the surroundings. Instantly, she found a few herbs that could cure the python's poison. This was the advantage of being in the depths of the 9 Shamans Mountain. There were spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs everywhere. It was up to you to find them. Swoosh! Luo Qingtong plucked the herbs and wrapped them with her spiritual energy. Then, she rubbed them. A bowl of green medicinal liquid appeared in her hand. This was Luo Qingtong's unique refining technique. Because she had the eye technique, she could clearly see the medicinal properties of the spiritual herbs. She could easily keep the medicinal properties that she needed and remove the unwanted ones. For her, the formula for the medicinal liquid did not exist at all. Even if she was missing a few herbs, she could immediately find the corresponding herbs to replace them. In Luo Qingtong's hands, as long as the result was confirmed, as long as you could find the corresponding medicinal herbs, she could break through the limitations of the formula and refine the corresponding medicine for you. In the 24th century, countless people wanted to ask her to take action. After all, with the rapid development of technology, many precious medicinal herbs had become extinct. Many recipes already existed in name only. But in the hands of Luo Qingtong, none of this was a problem. The reason why the poison in her eyes could not be cured was because there was no substitute for the antidote in the 9 Shaman Mountain. He must have seen a ghost. Who was the one who gave Luo Xianning the poison? Antidotes were so rare and hard to find. Obviously, he was determined to destroy the original owner's eyes. Luo Qingtong frowned as she thought. She raised her hand and fed the liquid medicine into the young man's mouth. Very quickly, the latter's pale and slightly ashy complexion returned to normal. Streams of black blood flowed out of the wound, but in an instant, it returned to the bright red color of a normal wound. All right, the python poison is cured. However, the poison that had accumulated in his body for many years could not be cured immediately. After all, the young man's body was too weak. The poison had merged too tightly with his meridians. Curing the poison was not something that could be done in a short period of time. Luo Qingtong could use her eye technique to completely separate the poison from the young man's meridians. Chapter 32. Tisk, troublesome. Luo Qingtong raised her hand and wrote down a prescription for the youth's body. Then, she stuffed it into the youth's arms. At the same time, she noted that if the poison was to be completely detoxified, the heretical physician ghostly eyes could be found. She injected her aura into the young man's body and used her inner sight to temporarily isolate the poison in his body from his meridians. This way, the youth would not be affected by the accumulated poison until the aura she injected into his body disappeared. His innate talent would be revealed. As long as the people around him injected their aura into his body and ensured that their aura did not disappear, the poison would have no effect on the youth. After doing all this, Luo Qingtong carried the youth in her arms again and prepared to leave. At this moment, Little Pig, who had been silently hiding in her sleeve with his butt sticking up, seemed to have thought of something and jumped up with a yelp. Oh no, oh no. Because of your messy words, I forgot about that matter. Quick, quick, quick. Let's go. It'll be too late if we don't leave now. Little Pig's 4 little trotters jumped up and down in Luo Qingtong's sleeve like an ant on a hot pan. What's the matter? Luo Qingtong had almost forgotten about Little Pig's silence. When she noticed that something was wrong with Little Pig's voice, she immediately freed one of her hands and pulled Little Pig out. What else are you hiding from me? What do you mean, what else am I hiding from you? Before Little Pig could finish his sentence, rumble. The entire 9 Shaman Mountain started to shake. Bam! Caught off guard, Luo Qingtong lost her balance and fell to the ground with the youth in her arms. The entire 9 Shaman Mountain range was shaking violently, as if something was about to emerge from the ground. Luo Qingtong lifted her eyes and scanned the area. She was instantly stunned. Not far away, on the highest peak of the 9 Shaman Mountain range, a strange scene suddenly appeared. Countless multicolored rays of light seemed to descend from the sky, completely enveloping the mountain peak. On top of the mountain peak, there seemed to be a huge shadow slowly rising. What is this? Luo Qingtong looked at this scene in surprise. The shadow was so large that it almost covered the entire area within a radius of several hundred miles. Rays of golden light were refracted from it. In the next second, a shocking spectacle of the immortal palace appeared in front of Luo Qingtong's eyes. Amidst the golden light, a magnificent, mirage-like immortal palace suddenly appeared. Rumble. The gigantic immortal palace seemed to have been formed out of thin air. Its appearance in the midst of the golden light startled everyone in the Jiu-Wu mountain range. Even the countless people who were tens of thousands of miles away saw this shocking scene. At the same time, in Windgaze City, the capital of Eastern Fence Country, Yuan Mo frowned as he looked at 7th Princess Yuan Shui, who was standing in front of him. His extraordinarily handsome face was filled with coldness. "Why are you here?" Yuan Ma's tone wasn't very good. He happened to pass by the eastern border country for some business and saw his sister here. He understood Yuan Shui's personality. She had always hated and disliked Luo Qingtong and didn't want her to be his wife. Why would she suddenly come here for no reason? When he thought about how he had just become a new student of the Holy Institute and how Yuan Shui had been nagging Luo Qingtong that he wasn't worthy of her, Yuan Ma's gaze suddenly turned sharp. Chapter 33. Who said I'm here for her? Being stared at by Yuan Ma like this, Yuan Shui was very nervous. She retorted with a guilty conscience. Then she saw her brother's face darken, which made her angry. She had always been spoiled and willful. She was the only daughter of the Empress of the Tianyu Empire. She was also the sister of Yuan Mo, a proud son of the heavens. Her status was extremely noble. Even the Emperor of Tianyu treated her like the apple of his eye. Almost no one dared to give her any face. Seeing that Yuan Mo actually scolded him for Luo Qingtong, he immediately felt wronged and angry. So what if I'm here for her? Imperial brother, why are you so protective of such a woman who doesn't have any self-awareness? Yuan Shui was angry. She wasn't afraid of her brother anymore. She raised her voice. She doesn't know if she's good enough for you. If I were her, I would have killed myself out of shame. The number one genius of the Luo family in the easternly country, the number one beauty. She's really amazing. Any young lady from a low-level family in the Tianyu Empire is better than her. She pouted and looked at Yuan Ma. Brother, you're already a heaven-grade freshman of the Saint Academy. You're going to the Saint capital soon. In the Empire of Qin, the Saint dynasty, the 8 empires, 3,000 high-level countries, 8,000 middle-level countries, and tens of thousands of low-level countries, how many people can enter the Saint Academy? No more than 10,000 people. And there are only a few hundred heaven-grade freshmen. When you get to the Saint Academy, you can have any woman you want. Why do you have to choose this Luo Qingtong? I don't want such a sister-in-law. I heard from Empress Mother that you must marry her. She also said that when she turns 16, you'll come to pick her up. Brother, are you stupid? Yuan Shui was even angrier. You don't like her at all. It's just a marriage contract. Why don't you just break off the engagement? But you don't want to. What's so good about Luo Qingtong? In terms of talent, she's not as good as. When she said this, she seemed to feel that she had spilled the beans and quickly stopped talking. Anyway, brother, you're the clouds in the sky. Luo Qingtong is the mud on the ground. With her status and talent, she is not worthy of you at all. She might not even be able to get into the Holy Academy's branch in the imperial capital. How embarrassing it is for you to have such a princess. I'm doing this for your own good. You obviously have a better choice, imperial brother. Are you done? Yuan Ma looked at her coldly, then stood up abruptly. If you're done talking, then hurry up and go back. I have things to do, so I don't have time for you. Don't force me to send people to take you back. In addition, Luo Qingtong and I are engaged. I don't like her, but I must marry her. No one can change this. You can treat her as a decoration, a mass of air that doesn't exist. But she is destined to be my princess. Yuan Mo said as he strode out. Imperial brother. Seeing his departing figure, Yuan Shui stomped her feet in anger. Why must Imperial Brother be so stubborn? Damn it! Fortunately, he had already made the first move. Luo Qingtong wants to be my royal sister-in-law. Maybe in her next life. Just as Yuan Shui was about to leave in a huff and reluctantly, there was a rumble. A deafening sound came from the horizon. Then, under the astonished gazes of countless people, a huge palace appeared on the highest peak of the Jiuwu mountain range. Yuan Ma, who had already walked some distance away, looked up when he heard the commotion. His pupils shrank instantly. Chapter 34. What is that? Everyone looked at the changes at the peak of the Nine Shaman Mountain in shock. They didn't know how such a huge palace had appeared out of thin air. The vast, majestic, and endless aura suddenly poured out in all directions when the enormous palace appeared, causing countless people to boil with excitement. It's the immortal sect's ruins. It must be the immortal sect's ruins. Legend has it that the immortal sect's ruins were buried before the Nine Shaman Mountain, but everyone thought it was just a rumor. I didn't expect it to be true. Countless voices sounded from all directions. Everyone looked at the huge immortal sect's ruins with fiery eyes. Instantly, they rushed towards the Nine Shaman Mountain range. The immortal sect's ruins. This was the immortal sect's ruins. The legendary inheritance left behind by the immortal sect. Even if there was no inheritance, the treasures within were enough to make countless people go crazy. Shwa shwa shwa. Numerous figures rushed towards the Nine Shaman Mountain range from all directions. Among them, there was the aura of martial emperors who could stand in the air, as well as soul masters who could use soul techniques. The cultivators of the true Spill continent were divided into two types, martial cultivators and soul cultivators. Martial cultivation was the cultivation of martial skills and the strengthening of one's body. Soul cultivators cultivated spiritual power and soul power. Legend has it that every human soul had its own spirituality. As long as one could awaken this spirituality, they would be able to wield incredible power. In the true Spill continent, this spirituality was called the Soul Seal. Only those with the Soul Seal could cultivate their souls and become a soul master. In the true Spill continent, there were very few people who could awaken the Soul Seal and become a soul master. Most people could only cultivate martial arts and continuously surpass their limits by refining their bodies. This kind of cultivation was much more difficult than becoming a soul master, and it was very difficult to advance. In comparison, soul masters who had the Soul Seal could sense the power of the laws of heaven and earth and were much more blessed than martial cultivators. Rumble. As everyone rushed towards the immortal sect's ruins, Luo Qingtong also looked at the huge palace on the peak of the mountain with shock in her eyes. Little Pig, who was being strangled in her hands, also stared blankly. It's over, it's over. The seal has been broken. I told you to run. You stupid woman. Why aren't you running now? When that guy comes out. Before it could finish its words, there was a roar. An incomparably loud roar suddenly resounded like a clap of thunder, spreading in all directions. The shadow of an enormous beast suddenly appeared behind the pavilion. A pair of large lantern-like eyes slowly opened in the darkness. Holy shit! That guy really ran out. Before Little Pig could finish his sentence, Luo Qingtong grabbed him by the neck and pulled him out. What the hell is going on? You better tell me honestly. The girl narrowed her eyes dangerously. She knew there was something wrong with this pig. It called itself the ancient divine pig, and it had somehow signed some kind of contract with her. Now, it seemed to have something to do with this immortal palace that had suddenly appeared. What was it trying to do? Now is not the time to talk about this. Little Pig was about to go crazy. I've already signed a contract with you. What are you afraid of? Do you know that this kind of contract is the worst for me? He looked behind Luo Qingtong. The latter's back was facing the peak of the mountain, so she naturally didn't know that the giant beast that had appeared behind the immortal palace had already turned its head to look at her. You stupid woman, run. Little Pig stomped his hooves with a mission. Then, he suddenly opened his beady eyes wide. Dodge! Boom! Before he could finish his words, Luo Qingtong felt an extremely dangerous aura coming from behind her. Chapter 35. Bam! She threw herself to the side and fell to the ground with the young man in her arms. Then, she was sent flying by the huge shockwave. Fortunately, she calculated her eye technique well and landed at the weakest part of the attack. She didn't suffer any serious injuries even though she was sent flying. You stupid pig, what did you do? Luo Qingtong gritted her teeth as she looked at the huge crater that was almost 100 meters wide where she was standing before. Just a little bit more and she would have been blasted into minced meat. Luo Qingtong looked behind her. A pair of incomparably large golden eyes met her gaze in midair. The light in the eyes was like the radiance of stars and fire. It was extremely brilliant and terrifying. Luo Qingtong looked at the huge tail that was waving from the shadows. She wished she could strangle the pig in her arms. What the hell did you provoke? She gnashed her teeth and said. It's the divine connecting beast. Little Pig was kicking the ground with its 4 hooves in her hand while squeaking like a little pig waiting to be slaughtered. Its strength is only second to the ancient divine beasts. Why aren't you running? You'll be dead if you don't run. It's coming for us. Get lost. It's obviously coming for you. This stupid pig signed a contract with her and caused her to be implicated. Just wait until I get out of here safely and see how I'll deal with it. Luo Qingtong gnashed her teeth in hatred. Seeing that the huge beast was about to make a move again, she suddenly dashed forward and began to escape. A martial master connecting with a divine connecting beast. Heavens, you really think highly of me. I'm really going to be played to death. Before Luo Qingtong left, she couldn't care less about the young man in her arms. She wasn't sure what would happen to her in the end. Before she left, she used her eye technique to search for a safe corner and pushed the young man in her arms out. Then, she waved her hand and covered the unconscious young man with countless leaves and branches. Swoosh! Swoosh! After doing all this, Luo Qingtong ran out with all her strength. Behind her, the huge beast finally appeared from the shadows. Luo Qingtong turned around and took a look. The appearance of the divine sky-connecting beast was extraordinarily beautiful. Its snow-white fur covered its entire body from head to tail, and it was as elegant and flamboyant as silk. 9 long, snow-white tails floated in the air, almost covering the entire 9 Shaman mountain range within them. This divine sky-connecting beast looked like a tiger, a leopard, and a cat. It even looked a little like a fox. Luo Qingtong couldn't tell what the other party was. Its pair of dazzling golden eyes revealed the majesty of a divine beast. Rumble. Every time its feet stomped on the ground, abyss-like cracks would appear on the ground. The crack continued to extend forward. If Luo Qingtong did not have the assistance of her eye technique, she would have fallen into the abyss when the giant beast jumped off the mountain for the first time. Rumble. 1 human and 1 beast chased after each other. And in the distance, the crowd that was rushing over here crazily saw this heaven-connecting divine beast, and their expressions suddenly changed. A divine beast. It's actually a divine beast. And it was extremely powerful. Seeing the might of the divine sky-connecting beast, the people's faces twitched violently and they instinctively ran back. A divine beast. They would be courting death if they charged up. The faces of the Soul Masters and Martial Emperors who were charging at the front turned green. They saw the divine sky-connecting beast charging towards them. There was no other way. It was their fault for flying so high. Wasn't this a ready-made target? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.